After the 71st birthday dinner my children threw for me, I smiled as I tidied up the cake and flowers, my heart full of gratitude. I thought maybe I was still lucky to be loved at this age. But when I went back to the living room to grab the shawl I'd forgotten, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice slice through me like a cold knife. "It's time to dump her in a nursing home. They know how to handle senile old people there. When she dies, we split the estate evenly." I froze behind the kitchen door, hands shaking, listening to a pen scratching on paper, tallying percentages beating in time with my racing heart. The others just nodded, calm as anything. There's a very good place in Lisbon for someone like Mom. The whole house, the place where I'd rocked my babies to sleep and cooked our first family meals, suddenly felt like a cold courtroom. My throat tightened, my breath strangled by the fading scent of birthday flowers. Quietly, I switched my smartwatch to record ending 2 years of playing the gentle, compliant mother. They had no idea that this warm birthday night would launch a counterattack that would end with them paying the price behind bars. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Sylvia Carver, 71, a widow living alone in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Portland, Maine. I taught English for more than 30 years and always believed family was the safest harbor in life. After my husband Richard passed, I poured all my love into our 2 children, Derek and Alana, and tried to treat my daughter-in-law and son-in-law like my own. I'm simple. I love my backyard garden, I bake apple pies, and I reread old novels at night. People see me as a gentle, fragile mother, living quietly in old age. What they don't know is that behind that softness is a seasoned woman, clear-headed and steady enough to make those who betrayed her pay. I stood in the dark a few more minutes, listening to the slick words coming from the very people I had birthed, raised, and protected all my life. Derek, my eldest, sounded like a stranger. If Mom hesitates tomorrow, I'll have Dr. Nolan certify that she's no longer competent. Brittany let out a dry little laugh. Good, the sooner the better. I already booked tickets to Lisbon. We just need the signatures. I looked at my trembling hands. They once shook from holding Derek when he burned with fever, from mending the sweater Alana wore to her first Christmas program. Now they shook from fearing those same children. I slipped away from the kitchen doorway, walking lightly so the floor wouldn't creak. Even the old wooden walls seemed to be holding their breath. In my small bedroom, I turned on the lamp and took out my worn notebook. It used to hold recipes and retirement plans. That night it became a ledger of sins. I wrote down every word I'd heard, afraid that by morning I might not believe they'd actually said it. Send Mom to Lisbon. Split the estate evenly. Medical power of attorney is done. I wrote as if each stroke of ink were a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. When the clock struck 12, I took a small USB from the desk drawer, plugged it into my smartwatch, and downloaded the recording. Every laugh, every word, every greedy breath, they were all captured. Derek thought I'd forgotten the safe code, but I created it. Quietly, I opened the safe in my room and checked. My wedding ring box, the house deed, and a handwritten letter from my late husband, Richard Carver, who left me 8 years ago. He once wrote, "If one day this house no longer feels like home, stay calm. The truth is always the ally of the decent." I smiled faintly. "Richard, I think it's time I used that." Near midnight, I heard a soft noise downstairs. I crept to the stairs, hid behind the wall, and saw Derek opening the secondary safe in the study, the one where I kept a few keepsake pieces of jewelry. Brittany stood guard, lighting the way with her phone. "Take it all. She won't need it tomorrow," Brittany whispered. I clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. I wasn't a mother to them anymore, just an obstacle between them and money. The next morning I pretended to wake late, eyes puffy like an insomniac old woman. Derek knocked on my door, voice airy. "Mom, Dr. Nolan will drop by for a checkup. Just routine." Routine. The word sounded like a sentence. I nodded lightly, smiling, hiding the fury boiling in my chest. Once they left, I opened my old laptop. The password still worked. In my email, I wrote to my former attorney Renee Park with an innocent subject line, "Roof insurance check." In the body, I wrote one line, "I need to see you as soon as possible. Urgent. Don't call." I printed every bank statement, noted the credit card numbers and the extra card Derek once talked me into opening, then sealed it all in an envelope and hid it in the flour bin in the kitchen pantry. Derek and Brittany hate to cook safest place there is. That afternoon, when Alana stopped by, I heard her whisper to her brother on the porch, "Dr. Nolan signed already. All that's left is the tickets tomorrow." I stood by the window and watched their reflections in the glass. The late sun threw a pale gold over everything, but I felt cold as steel. That night, I checked the doorbell camera via the app. One by one, Derek, Brittany, Alana had entered my house with their own keys while I was away the week before. I saved all the clips to an external drive and laid it carefully next to Richard's letter. I spent the whole night building a timeline, my own reverse plan for my fate. Morning. They'll unveil the vacation gift. Noon. Fake checkup doctor. Nolan certifies incompetence. Afternoon. Flight to Lisbon. Tomorrow night. My house is no longer in my name. I taped that note behind our wedding photo where no one would look. At 2 a.m., I went to the living room. The birthday candles still smelled like burnt wax. Balloon scraps littered the floor. I looked around every corner, held a memory. Derek's first steps, Alana at the piano, Richard hanging our family photo, and now it was all about to be sold off like old junk. I opened the safe one last time. The wedding ring box was gone. Derek must have taken it. I wiped my prints from the surface with a damp cloth, then locked it. Inside were only Richard's letter and a few stock certificates. I took the letter, kissed the shaky handwriting, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom, a slit where I used to stash loose change years ago. Outside, wind hissed through the old oaks. I stood at the window, staring at the night sky. No tears left. Only a cold steadiness rising in me, the calm of someone who knows peace sometimes requires a fight. I went back to bed and pulled the blanket to my chest. My watch still blinked, the recording saved. I smiled. The smile of someone who knows the game has turned. Tomorrow they'll think they're sending their mother on a vacation, but really, it'll be the first day of their self-destruction, step by step. Every piece of evidence, every word from their own mouths will walk them to the defendant's table. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, letting the wind sink with my heartbeat. My 71st birthday didn't end with a wish, it ended with a vow. I, Sylvia Carver, will not let anyone bury me while I'm still breathing. The next morning I woke to soft sunlight through the floral curtains I'd sewn 10 years ago. Coffee drifted up from the kitchen, mingling with light laughter. From the outside, it could have passed for a warm family morning, dutiful children fussing over their aging mother. But I knew those laughs weren't for me. I walked downstairs slowly, keeping my face serene. Derek wore a crisp shirt, Brittany arranged flowers, and Alana sat on the sofa holding a glossy gold envelope. "Good morning, Mom," Alana chirped, her smile stretched too wide. "We have a special gift for you. We want you to have a real vacation." I glanced at the envelope. Residencia Santa Luzia. Lisbon was printed in bold across the front. I knew exactly what it was. "In Portugal?" I asked lightly. "Yes, Mom," Derek said, feigning excitement. "The climate is great for seniors. There's medical care and activities. All you have to do is sign." I looked at the brochure showing a white building with sunlit corridors. The tagline read, "Where old age finds peace." I almost laughed. Even the place they planned to lock me up knew how to lie sweetly. "You think I need to go?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Derek stepped closer, resting a caring hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you left the gas on last night. If Brittany hadn't noticed, the whole house could have gone up." I looked him straight in the eye. "Did I forget, or did someone turn it on first?" He blinked and looked away. Brittany slid in, voice as sweet as artificial sugar. "Don't misunderstand. We just care about you. You're not young anymore. They'll take care of you 24/7 over there better than staying in this old house. This old house," those 4 words cut like a blade. "This house is the result of a lifetime of work. Every teacher's paycheck I ever saved. Its memory, love, the legacy of me and Richard. In their mouths, it was just an old house." I set the brochure down and looked at all 3. "You've gone to a lot of trouble, but I'm still clear-minded enough to decide where I go." No one answered. Brittany's eyes flicked to Derek, like signaling the next move. Right then, Alana pulled a clipped stack of papers from her bag. "Mom," she said, "Dr. Nolan already signed. This is temporary guardianship, just to keep everything legal. Derek and I will handle things for you." Temporary guardianship, 4 words, and I could see the net already strung. I took the paper and scanned it. Under Dr. Nolan Pierce, the blue ink was fresh, dated yesterday right after my birthday party. I picked up the pen from the flower vase, pretending to hold it to the light to read better. Meanwhile, I memorized every detail: the font, the slant of the signature, the oval seal in the right corner. It would all be evidence. Handing it back, I kept a faint smile. Very thorough of Dr. Nolan. Amazing how quickly he remembered me. Alana exhaled, thinking I'd softened. But in my head, the gears of a plan had already started to turn. Brittany clapped softly. "Great, I'll help you pack. You don't need to worry about a thing." I followed her upstairs, keeping my mild expression. My room, once scented with lavender and old books, felt oddly bare as Brittany rifled through drawers. "Take this," she said, pointing at pajamas. "And these, leave them. They provide everything there." I watched her hands, fingers heavy with rings, lift the valuable items one by one, the vintage watch, the gold bracelet, the jewelry box. I pretended not to notice and asked, "What about those papers?" "What papers?" Her tone turned wary. I pointed to a desk drawer where I'd deliberately left a folder labeled Asset Authorization. Brittany opened it at once, eyes lighting up. Inside were old utility bills and bank flyers. She laughed and shook her head. "Why keep all this junk, Mom? I'm old. I keep it to remember," I said softly. Inside, I smiled. First trap sprung. Near noon, the doorbell rang. Derek called from the kitchen. "Dr. Nolan's here, Mom." I drew a long breath and went downstairs. Nolan Pierce, the doctor I'd trusted for more than a decade, stood in the living room with a black briefcase. He smiled politely. "Good to see you, Mrs. Carver. You look a bit tired today. Just a few quick questions." He took out a printed questionnaire. His voice was flat, mechanical. "What day of the week is it? Can you read your home address? Do you know who the current president is?" I answered clearly, steady and precise. He nodded vaguely, slashing his pen across the page, barely looking at me. When he went to sign the last page, I tilted my head and asked mildly, "Dr. Pierce, did you review my MRI from last year? The one you signed stating my memory is completely normal." His hand paused. Just a second, but enough for me to see a flicker of panic. I'll look into that," he stammered. "No rush," I smiled. "I just want to be sure you remember your longtime patients." Behind him, Brittany shot Derek a quick look. Both stayed silent. The exam ended fast in a stiff silence. Nolan signed, snapped his case shut, and left without meeting my eyes. As the door clicked, Derek turned to me, rushed. "The flight leaves at 4 p.m. You should have an early lunch and rest." "So soon?" I asked lightly. "Tickets already booked?" I just want everything to go smoothly, he said, evading my gaze. Brittany rolled a small suitcase upstairs, packing a few outfits, a notebook, and random items enough for the first few weeks. I noticed every valuable thing from jewelry to documents had been removed. She zipped it closed and smiled wide, like a cut. All set, Mom. They'll take great care of you. You just rest. I nodded. I will rest, but not for long. When they left, the room went quiet. I sat on the bed, looking at the tiny suitcase, the sum of what they thought should be my remaining life. I laid my hand on the cold metal latch. Under the calm, I knew I wasn't a cornered old woman anymore. On the table, my smartwatch blinked the night's recording, already backed up to the cloud. I opened my laptop to check for Renee's reply. Nothing yet, but the signal was out. I stood, straightened the curtains, and looked at the backyard where I'd once taught the kids to plant sunflowers. The flowers still turned their faces to the light, as if they believed the sun always returns. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm like them. In a few hours they'd think I was following the plan, but once that plane took off, I wouldn't be a forced passenger. I'd be ready for another journey, taking back justice with my own hands. The taxi had been waiting since 7 a.m. I heard the engine and smelled exhaust drifting through the window. Derek hauled the suitcase out first. Brittany did one last sweep of the house like a new owner. She paused at my wedding photo with Richard, tilted her head, and murmured to Derek, "We should sell this place soon, before prices dip." I gripped the stair rail so my hands wouldn't shake. Every slate step under my feet was Richard's handiwork. He laid each stone our first winter here. At the last step, I knew I was leaving not just a house, but 40 years of my life. "Let's go, Mom," Derek said softly, taking my elbow with polished tenderness. I smiled and nodded. No one knew that inside my sweater I'd sewn a small strip of fake hair hiding a slim USB with all their betrayals. As the car door shut, Brittany told the driver, "International Terminal, Gate 2." I looked out the window. The oaks in front swayed in the morning wind, leaves falling like a farewell. I fixed the image in my mind, not knowing if I'd ever see it again. The drive to the airport was 40 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Derek stayed quiet, checking his phone. Brittany kept instructing me, "Remember, Mom, someone from Santa Lucia will meet you. Your room is ready." I turned to her with a mild smile. "I know. You're very thorough." She missed the irony and nodded. "We just want the best care for you." At the airport, I was processed like a special assistance passenger. Derek held a thick folder labeled medical travel file and handed it to the passport agent, adding quietly, but clearly, "She's traveling for a health program. Everything's prepaid. Please help us get her on board safely." It sounded like I was fragile cargo. When they finished, Brittany leaned in and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'll call you as soon as you land, okay?" I looked her in the eye and said softly, "I'll be sure to call you right when I need to." She smiled, not catching my meaning, and walked away. On the plane, I had a window seat. The sky outside was a heavy blue-gray curtain. I took a tissue from my bag and held it to my mouth like a habit, really to cover my hands as I loosened the fake hair strip and slid out the razor-thin USB. In the dim light, I labeled the audio files with a tiny pen. 1. 71st birthday night. 2. Guardianship plan. 3. Dr. Nolan. Each title was a blade I'd hidden up my sleeve. I put my phone in airplane mode, opened email, and drafted an unsent message titled, "If I Disappear." I attached the first recording and saved it as a draft. If someone grabbed my phone, they'd see nothing unusual, but the data would be safe in the cloud. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I looked down at Portland one last time. Small streets, mist-topped roofs, the Kennebec River catching the light shrinking like an old photo pulled away from my fingers. I laid a hand over my chest, my heart beat slow and steady. No more shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. 8 hours later, we landed in Lisbon in a soft, golden afternoon. The air smelled of salt and ripe oranges, a scent I once loved in my younger years that now tightened my chest. At arrivals, a middle-aged man in white uniform held a sign with my name, Sylvia Carver Residencia Santa Luzia. I walked up with a polite smile. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Luis, the center's coordinator. Happy to welcome you," he said, courteous and empty. "I'm sure you are," I said dryly. A small silver car carried me from the airport, past cobblestone streets and balconies draped with purple flowers. If not for the circumstances, I might have loved this city. But to me, Lisbon wasn't a new land, it was a gilded cage. Residencia Santa Luzia sits on a low hill overlooking the Tagus River. The building is bright white, glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun, the orange grove fragrant. Everything is designed to look like a luxury resort, but all I could see were invisible bars. The manager, a tall woman with curled hair and a professional smile, welcomed me in the main lobby. "Welcome to Santa Luzia, where life begins again in peace," she said in fluent English. I answered softly, "Peace, huh? We'll see." She handed me my medical file and flipped through the pages as she read aloud. "Mrs. Carver, 71. Diagnosis: mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. Requires regular supervision." I closed my eyes and memorized every phrase. Mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. That's the language that legalizes confinement. My room was number 207 on the second floor. The window faced the Tagus, where the sunset spread like honey on the water. Everything was clean: white bed, small table with a vase of oranges, beautiful to the point of empty. I opened my suitcase, just a few outfits, a notebook and an old coat. No family photos, no wedding ring, no letters from Richard. "You have a roommate," the manager said, pointing to the opposite bed. An elderly woman with silver hair was embroidering a handkerchief. She looked up, smiling kindly. "I'm Donna Teresa, 82. You just arrived?" "Yes," I said. "They told me this is a wonderful place to rest." She gave a small smile, eyes sad. "You get used to it. Everyone says that when they come." I nodded, but all I felt inside was a long stretch of cold. That evening they brought my first meal: pumpkin soup, bread, and a small pill on the tray. I asked, "What is this?" "Pill?" The nurse smiled. "Just a multivitamin. Helps you sleep." I didn't take it. I slipped the pill into my pocket and wrote in my notebook, "Evening pill, unknown contents." When night fell, the river's waves mixed with the light wind outside the window. I sat at the table and switched on the small lamp. Warm light spread across a blank page. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line, "Day 1 Lisbon. The taxi is gone, the house is gone, but I still have my memory and my evidence. Tomorrow, call Renee. Begin." I closed the notebook and let out a long breath. In the dark, Donna Teresa snored softly while I stayed awake. Every sound of the night felt like a countdown. I knew life in this beautiful prison would test my patience. I also knew that in every overbright corner of Santa Luzia, I would find a way out. I lay back on the bed and stared at the stark white ceiling. The smell of cleaner mixed with a sharp orange scent. I closed my eyes, but I didn't pray for sleep. I just repeated 3 words like a quiet vow. Remember, wait, strike back. Tomorrow morning, when the sun comes through the window of room 207, I'll start the next chapter not with tears, but with a first phone call. The fight to reclaim my dignity had started, and this time I'm the one holding the keys. The next morning, Lisbon's sunlight slanted through the window of room 207, lighting the white curtain as if nothing were sad here, but I knew light doesn't erase the feeling of being locked in. I ate breakfast in silence, the oatmeal already cold, the multivitamin warming in my palm with my body heat. I quietly tossed it down the bathroom drain, then opened my notebook and drew a line. Day 2. no pills. Around 10 a.m., I went to the nurse's station and offered a gentle smile. I'd like to make a video call to my granddaughter. She misses me. The young nurse, named Sophia, answered softly, "Of course, Mrs. Carver. The computer's in the common room, I'll turn it on." The old computer sat in the corner, silver-framed monitor, keys worn smooth. When Sophia stepped away, I opened the browser and typed the email address, only Renee Park, and I knew. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I typed fast, no accents, no greeting. "Renee, I'm safe. At Santa Luzia, Lisbon. They lied about my condition. Need urgent help. S." I hit send, then pretended to open Zoom to complete the act of calling my granddaughter. Not even 10 minutes later, a new mail chime sounded. I opened the inbox, and when the subject line popped up, my breath stopped. From Renee Park, subject, urgent reply. "Where exactly are you?" "Derek just brought your death certificate to the bank to withdraw all assets. They say you passed away in Lisbon." They didn't just want the house and the money, they wanted to wipe me from the legal record, as if I'd never been their mother. Have you ever seen a loved one treated cruelly just because they were old? Share how that felt in the comments, so voices like this aren't forgotten. I went numb. My fingers fell from the keyboard. The characters on the screen blurred. So they weren't only removing me from my home, they were erasing me from legal life. They buried me on paper. It took me nearly 5 minutes to breathe normally again. Once steady, I opened a reply and typed slowly, one word at a time. "Renee, listen closely. Temporary guardianship signed by Dr. Nolan Pierce, dated the day after my birthday. Sent to Lisbon was forced. Derek and Alana hold my passport. Brittany took assets. I have recordings. Freeze everything now. Sylvia." In less than 10 minutes, her response arrived. "You need to sign an emergency power of attorney so I can file for a protective order and freeze the accounts. I'll send an international form valid between the U.S. and Portugal with consular verification instructions." I printed on the center's machine. They didn't notice, signed all 3 copies, then asked Sophia to scan and send to my daughter in the U.S., really sending them straight to Renee. Renee replied right after, "Step 1 done. I've filed the freeze request. I'm sending in a colleague in Lisbon, attorney Miguel Duarte, to support you. Be cautious. Don't trust anyone there." I closed the computer, my heart still racing. In that moment, I knew I'd just reclaimed the most important thing, the right to exist on paper. At noon, the facility manager came into my room wearing a stiff smile. "Mrs. Carver, I need to verify your file. There are a few items to add." She opened her case and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I glanced over it. Passport copy, medical records, admission form, treatment consent. All bore my signature, but not written by me. I feigned confusion. "I've signed so many forms, I don't remember. May I take another look?" She hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. I flipped page by page, eyes noting every detail, stamps, dates, and especially the line that read, "Mrs. Carver has moderate cognitive decline." I looked up. Which doctor certified this? "Dr. Nolan Pierce, your physician in the States. That's his original signature." I gave a thin smile. "Right. The same man who confirmed I was fine 6 months ago." She looked flustered, then hurried to gather the papers. "Either way, please rest assured. Your family loves you very much. They call every day." I tilted my head. "Do they? Then why haven't I heard them?" They said you need quiet." I smiled, the kind of smile you give when you know you're being lied to but pretend to believe it. When she left, I took out my phone, quietly switched on the recorder, and captured the entire meeting. Every sentence, every rustle of paper, any of it could be evidence. Near dusk, while I was walking in the garden, an older caregiver who seemed honest leaned close and whispered in halting English, "Your family told us, be careful because you are very confused. They said you already sold your house, so we shouldn't let you contact the U.S." I stood still, looking up at rows of ripe oranges releasing their scent. So this was the perfect plan. Lock me abroad, fake the medical file, then erase me from U.S. records. I gave a sad smile and told him, "Thank you, but I remember everything, every number, every word they said." He looked surprised, nodded, and quietly walked away. Back in my room, I photographed the entire Santa Lucia file, especially the page with the official seal, and sent it to Renee. I compared it with the copy Derek had sent the bank from the photo I'd taken at home before leaving. The two seals were completely different, one real, one fake. I knew once Renee had them, she'd have enough to file suit. That night I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool on my face, orange scent mixing with the bland smell of disinfectant. I opened my phone and started combing through social media, a habit I thought I'd dropped. Brittany Carver came up first. Her profile was full of photos, a new handbag, a fancy dinner, the caption, "Finally free." I curled a smile. Free, huh? She won't feel that way for long. Scrolling down, I found Alana's post. A photo of white lilies with the words, "Today, my mother left this world peacefully. Rest in peace, Mom." Dozens of people offered condolences in the comments. Someone wrote, "She was a wonderful mother." Reading those words chilled me. They had truly killed me, not with knives, but with words, with signatures, with a fake seal. I closed the phone and looked in the mirror. I didn't see a weak woman, I saw a face fully awake. I whispered to my reflection, "You want to bury me alive? Fine, I'll be the ghost that won't let you sleep." Lisbon's night was unusually quiet. Only the wall clock ticked each second. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 3 Portugal. Renee got the email. Miguel Duarte will come. Derek declared me dead. Alana cried online. Brittany spent money. They think they've won. They forgot. I'm alive." And I remember. I folded the notebook, set down my pen, and looked out the window. Moonlight glittered on the Tagus. "Richard," I whispered, "I promise you, the children you raised will face justice, not with rage but with truth." I turned off the light. In the dark, I felt calmer than ever. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was someone hiding in the enemy's stronghold, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the clock hit midnight, I closed my eyes and smiled. Tomorrow, I'd meet Miguel Duarte. And then the curtain of lies my children built would start to tear piece by piece. The next morning, I was told I had a visitor. When I walked to the lobby, I saw a steady-looking middle-aged man in a light gray suit holding a black briefcase. He introduced himself in gently accented English. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Miguel Duarte, associate of attorney Renee Park. I'm here to support you legally." He showed a bar card from the Lisbon Bar Association. Everything looked proper and professional. I shook his hand, feeling a firm, warm steadiness, the exact thing I needed. "Renee filled me in," he said as we sat at a small table in the lounge. "I need to verify some data before we move to freeze the accounts. Here, you have the right to request access to your own medical and financial files, including admission records." I nodded. "I'll do everything. They used the law to bury me. Now I'll use the law to bring me back." Miguel smiled and opened his laptop. "Exactly." He walked me step by step into the patient portal, a tool I never thought I'd need. From there, we downloaded all admission charges, billing, and the medical proxy form Derek sent to Santa Lucia. Everything looked tidy, except for one detail that chilled me: my electronic signature. I zoomed in. Sylvia R. Carver appeared clear. The slant familiar, but it wasn't mine. I write with a slight left slant. This one tilted right. Neat to the point of mechanical. Miguel pointed gently. IP address of the signer 198.62.4.177. Ring any bells? I shook my head. He continued, "It's registered in Maine, right in Portland, and the address matches Derek Carver's home." A cold line ran down my spine. I looked up, my voice hoarse. So he signed for me. Exactly. Under federal rules, that's electronic identity fraud. Very serious. Miguel immediately sent the data to Renee. In under an hour, I got her reply, "I've filed an emergency motion to freeze all co-owned accounts. Banks in Maine and Boston have been notified. Derek can't pull another dollar. I've also requested a freeze on his secondary cards, including the medical credit card opened under your name." I read that line again and again, like breathing after days of suffocation. But that was only the beginning. Miguel slid his chair closer and opened another file. "Do you know this company?" On screen, Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, registered in Delaware. Owner, Derek Carver. Chief accountant, Connor Reeves, Alana's husband. I curled a smile. "A shell company." Miguel nodded. "Exactly. Started 8 months ago. I just found 3 transfers from your accounts totaling more than $480,000 flowing into this company within 2 weeks before you died on paper." I went quiet. The hurt was gone. Only a spreading cold remained. "They really did their math," I said slowly. Miguel clicked through screenshots from social media. Derek at a handover ceremony for a new boat, arm around Brittany. The caption, "Grateful for a fresh start." Another, Brittany trying on a diamond ring in a Boston store, smiling bright enough to blind. And Alana, my daughter, posting, her gleaming marble kitchen, finally finished a little dream. I looked at the images, not angry anymore, just empty. Motherhood's supposed to be unbreakable, reduced to assets, shares, and balances. I folded my hands and said quietly, "Save everything. All of it. Every photo, every word." Miguel nodded and stored it all on an encrypted drive. He asked, "Anything else we should add?" I answered, "I have recordings, photos, and doorbell camera data from my house. We need to stitch them together. Prove they didn't just take money, they orchestrated the whole thing." That afternoon we worked for more than 3 hours. Miguel linked each chain of evidence: the birthday night recording, the forged signatures, Derek's home IP, and the medical expense payments. He called it a sealed chain of proof. "When this chain is tight enough," he said, "no lawyer will be able to save them." I nodded, feeling a bit lighter. For the first time since leaving Portland, I didn't feel alone. 2 days later, Miguel returned with news. I met with Santa Lucia's board. Once they heard about the false admission paperwork, they got worried. They're now willing to cooperate, handing over all records, audio, and camera footage. They don't want to be dragged into international collusion. I gave a small laugh. Finally, someone knows how to be afraid. He placed copies of what they'd sent: admission receipts, health status forms. In the medical history line, italicized, "Patient previously diagnosed with moderate cognitive decline per Dr. Nolan Pierce." Miguel looked at me. "Renee is preparing a court order compelling Nolan to release your real medical records. I expect results soon." That afternoon, I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool. A strange feeling spread through me, not hatred, but resolve. What I'm doing isn't just about money or reputation. I'm taking back the right to trust myself. 3 days later, Renee's email arrived. "Sylvia, we obtained Nolan's records. It's all clear. 6 months ago, he signed normal cognition. But the version Derek submitted says moderate decline. Signature date exactly matches the day Brittany booked the Lisbon tickets." In other words, they coordinated it, and Nolan knew. I read slowly, my temple pulsing. Everything fell into place. Brittany booked flights. Nolan signed a fake diagnosis. Derek moved money into a shell company. Alana announced a peaceful passing. A perfect chain if I were actually dead. Miguel looked at me, voice firm. You're not a victim now, you're the plaintiff. We have enough evidence. We just need time to finish the filings before we go public. I stared out at the Lisbon sunset on the river. The light stretched like a ribbon of melted gold. In that moment I thought of Richard, the man who taught me that every wrong leaves a trace, if you're patient enough to follow it. Now I had all the traces. I closed the notebook and added one last line for the day. Day 8 Santa Lucia forged signature found. IP. Derek's house. Accounts frozen. LLC. Blue Ledge Ventures exposed. Nolan Pierce, complicit. The game has turned. When I finished, I put down the pen and lifted my head to the sunset. The breeze carried a hint of orange blossom, and I felt an odd calm. I don't need violence for revenge. I just need the truth to do its job, and it's doing it very well. That night before bed, I opened an old Christmas photo of our whole family. I looked at each of my children's faces and said quietly, "You chose money over your mother, but I choose justice over tears." Then I turned off the light and let darkness cover the room. In the silence, I could hear my heartbeat, no longer afraid, steady and firm, like someone becoming herself again. On my 9th morning at Santa Lucia, a knock sounded just as I was finishing my journal line. When I opened the door, Miguel stood there with the facility manager, her face stiff, her polite smile forced. "Mrs. Carver," she said in a gravelly voice, "we've reviewed your admission file. There are some serious errors." Arms folded, Miguel answered calmly. "Legal errors, to be precise. I've notified the consulate and Portugal's Ministry of Health. If the center doesn't want a criminal investigation, the best option is to let Mrs. Carver leave immediately." I watched the manager's face drain pale. After a few seconds of silence, she nodded. "Of course, we'll issue discharge papers at once. Reason: admission based on inaccurate information." 3 hours later, I received the official document, the red seal still wet. I set it on the table and looked at it for a long time, as if it were my first ticket to freedom after months of confinement. While I packed, my roommate, Dona Teresa, stood in the doorway, eyes wet. She held my hand, her voice trembling. "Do what we didn't dare. Seek justice for those buried alive here." I hugged her tightly. "I promise. And when this is over, I'll send you a card to prove we still have a voice." My suitcase was light, a few clothes, a notebook, and the USB stitched deep inside my sweater pocket. Miguel walked me to the car. Santa Lucia shrank in the rearview mirror, white walls, blazing orange groves. I knew I'd never forget that sweet scent, the smell of freedom laced with bitterness. The U.S. consulate in Lisbon sits on a leafy street, the American flag rippling in the noon sun. Stepping through the gate felt like walking back into the part of my life that had been cut off. Miguel introduced me to a consular officer, a young, solid woman named Emma. "We've been briefed on your case," she said. "We'll record this as international fraud, but first, we need to verify your identity and your cognitive status." I smiled. "I'm more than willing, as long as no one calls me incompetent again." The evaluation took over an hour. Memory, response, reading, writing, arithmetic. I answered clearly, even recalling Richard's social security number from 1989. When we finished, Emma smiled at me. "Mrs. Carver, I'll state in the report, fully lucid, fully aware of actions and circumstances. Welcome back to the legal status of your own citizenship." I smiled through tears. Every paper and seal today didn't just restore my name, they restored me. Miguel walked me out into the sunlight, glinting on his hair. "Renee just texted," he said. "A court in Maine has issued a temporary protective order for you and the property. All transactions to sell your house are suspended. They can't do anything further." I exhaled, like dropping a boulder from my chest. "So, I can finally go home." "Yes." He nodded. And when you're back, we'll let them step confidently into the trap they dug themselves." 2 days later, I boarded a flight back to Boston. For 10 hours, I couldn't sleep. Each engine vibration kicked my heart, as if I feared this was only a dream. When the wheels touched down, I gripped the armrest and breathed deep. The smells of coffee, exhaust, and melting snow wrapped around me. Renee waited at the international arrivals door. Without a word, she hugged me hard. Warmth spread through me, pushing out the months of strangeness. "We did it," she whispered, "and don't worry, I haven't told them you're alive." The quieter we are, the harder your punch. We left the airport in her black SUV. Boston lay under mist, buildings reflecting a pale green glow. I watched familiar signs and streets, the ones that had carried me to school and brought me home at dusk. "What's next?" I asked. Renee opened a thick file and smiled. "The bait plan. I've sent formal invitations to Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor Reeves, your son-in-law. Reason: a final. Supplemental inheritance closing at the notary office. They believe they're getting the rest of your estate." I nodded, lips pressed. "And I'll be the surprise gift at that meeting." Renee nodded, eyes sharp. "I've prepped hidden cameras, recorders, and a faux packet titled Irregularities in the Estate. We just need to tug at their greed. Once they speak for themselves, there's no walking it back." That night at a small hotel by the Charles, I looked in the mirror. My face was older, my hair grayer, but my eyes were different. No fear, only clarity and steadiness. I took scissors and cut my hair to my neck. Silver strands fell to the floor, light as old burdens. The next morning, I stopped at a glasses shop near the hotel and switched to round frames. I looked a few years younger. The clerk said, "You look much more energetic." I smiled. "Thanks. I'm about to see my family, after a fake funeral." Renee arrived with a new packet and a heavy silver gray coat. "Wear this," she said. "When you step into the room, the light will catch and they'll freeze." I nodded, took it, and asked, "Do you think I'll shake?" "You might," she said honestly. "So here's a trick. Breathing practice. Facing them, inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Keep your heart rate under 80. Don't let them see you angry. You don't have to shout to win." That evening, I paced the room, walking slow and steady like someone relearning how to step into life. I pictured the notary door opening, 4 faces lifting eyes going dead when the dead woman walked in. Before bed, I wrote a letter, my hand shaky but firm. "Dear Richard, I'm about to do what would make you proud. Not revenge, but restoring the truth. If someday I don't get to say this, I've forgiven them, but I haven't forgotten. Forgetting lets lies live on. When this is done, I'll burn this letter." I folded it and set it beside the small notebook that had traveled with me the whole way. Outside, snow began to fall, whitening the street. I watched from the window, my breath fogging the glass. Tomorrow I won't be the woman forgotten in Lisbon. Tomorrow I'll return to my real name, Sylvia Carver, and the story they thought was over is just beginning. The notary office was on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown Boston. Winter light slanted through the windows and bounced off the polished floor. Every detail was set: long table with a gray cloth, a hidden camera in a planter, 2 tiny recorders under the tabletop. The air was cold, still, and seemed to be holding its breath for the storm. Renee ran one last check, then looked at me. "You sure?" I drew a long breath, keeping the rhythm she'd taught me. "I'm sure. Time to show them the person they thought they buried doesn't die so easily." "Then let me start," she said, straightening her collar and stepping out. Leaving me to wait in the next room, thin door cracked just enough to see everything. Exactly 10 a.m. They arrived. Derek led, black suit, tight face, sly eyes dulled by lack of sleep. Brittany followed in a deep red dress, lipstick darker than usual, laughing with Alana and Connor as if this were a celebration. "I told you, just the last formality," Derek said loudly, full of confidence. "Renee said it's just a few signatures." "Thank God," Brittany replied. "I'm sick of lawyers reading every page." Alana, my daughter, nodded, but her eyes showed nerves. Connor, my son-in-law, held a folder, more awkward than all of them. Renee stood, wearing her professional smile. "Welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Today, as in the invite, we'll do a final review of the supplemental estate of Sylvia Carver." They sat. Chair legs scraped the floor with an ugly squeal. Renee opened her folder, voice light but firm. "Before we sign, we need to clear up a few inconsistencies in the legal file. First, the death certificate." She set a copy on the table, turning it toward them. "This is the version submitted by Mr. Derek Carver to Portland Trust Bank, dated April 16th. However," she placed another page with a fresh red seal, "this is the official confirmation from Residencia Santa Lucia, Lisbon, Mrs. Sylvia Carver was discharged on March 24th, fully lucid, and signed in her own hand." The room froze. Derek went rigid, face as pale as the paper. Brittany leaned toward the confirmation, voice cracking. "This must be administrative confusion. In Europe their paperwork is messy." Renee raised an eyebrow, still calm. "Administrative confusion? I thought so too until I checked the digital registry. There's also video of Mrs. Carver signing her discharge." Alana covered her mouth. Connor stared down, avoiding everyone's eyes. Derek leaned forward, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Regardless, my mother, she was very weak. The center could have made a mistake." Renee nodded slightly, as if she'd been waiting for that. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up. On it was a social post. Brittany Carver in a white dress, smiling in a fancy restaurant, with a caption, "New Freedom, New Beginning." "This," Renee said slowly, "was posted March 25th, the exact day Mrs. Carver was taken to Lisbon." "Care to explain?" Brittany's throat closed. Her fist clenched, a chip flaking from her nail polish. "It was just a joke. A joke about freedom the day your mother-in-law died on paper?" Renee's smile turned cold. "Hilarious." Connor tried to interject, flustered. "I think we should stick to the inheritance process." Renee pivoted, voice sharp as a blade. "Then tell me," Mr. Connor Reeves, who filed the tax return for Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, a company funded with money withdrawn from Sylvia Carver's accounts. Connor opened his mouth with no sound. His throat bobbed, then rasped. I only did accounting support." "Derek said it was the family's investment fund," Renee cut in. "And you didn't find it odd that the fund launched right when your mother was declared incompetent and then dead on paper?" No one answered. Only the clock ticked and breathing grew loud. Brittany hissed at Derek. "You said everything was handled." "Shut up, I'm handling it," he snapped. That was my cue. I pushed the door. The hinge gave a small, eerie creak. 4 faces turned as one. I walked in, slow and steady on the wood floor. "I'm here," I said, voice calm but ringing. Very alive. And very clear. Time stopped. Alana burst into tears, hands shaking over her mouth. Connor's chair scraped back as he went pale. Brittany froze, eyes wide, then lunged for her phone, jabbing at the screen as if she could erase old posts. Derek, my son, swayed, bracing on the chair back, mouth open with no words. I stepped to the table and set down a small USB. The dry click sounded like a coffin tap. "Listen," I said evenly. "Listen to yourselves how you divided your mother that night." Renee hit play. The audio came through clearly, every laugh, every word. "When she dies, we split it evenly. And that jade bracelet, I'm taking it. Send her to Lisbon. They keep old people like prisoners there." Brittany's small laugh, Derek's hand slapping the table, and Alana's soft voice. As long as Mom doesn't suffer, I won't object. The room went still. None of them could meet my eyes. Only the recorder kept running, its red light blinking steady. I looked at each face, the ones I'd kissed goodnight, the hands I'd held through fevers now bowed like children caught stealing. I spoke slowly, firmly. Do you remember? When Richard died, we promised never to let this family fall apart. Yet you buried your own mother. For money. You sold off trust, and now that trust will be the evidence against you. Brittany gulped. Mom, what you heard. We were just angry. I gave a thin smile. Angry? What about the fake death certificate, the fake accounts, and the new Freedom Post? Anger or calculation? Derek finally found his voice hoarse. Mom, we were afraid you'd be scammed, taken advantage of. I wanted to protect you. Renee let out a small laugh, the kind that waits for a line like that. Really? Because the statements show you moved more than $480,000 into your own company. I looked straight at my son. Remember what I taught you? Good intentions never need forged papers. The room sank into silence. Then click the second recorder chimed, marking that the entire meeting had been captured. Renee stood, slid the USB into a sealed envelope. Thank you. We're done. Everything you just said will be forwarded to federal court and the Maine State Police. Derek lunged up. No! You can't. Renee cut him off, ice cold. We can. Because your mother, the one you declared dead, re-signed all legal documents 2 days ago. She's the plaintiff. And you, unfortunately, are the defendants. I pulled my gaze back and turned to leave. Behind me, Brittany collapsed into a chair, sobbing into the ticking of the clock. Derek said nothing, gripping the table until his knuckles went white. At the door, I looked back once. You claimed I wasn't clear-headed enough to manage my life. Today, I proved the opposite. Then I stepped into the hall. The door closed behind me, sealing in the smell of failure and guilt. Outside, winter light flooded everything. I took a deep breath and heard my heartbeat slow, steady, free. Their game was over. As for me, I was finally the one holding the cards. Police arrived the next morning. 3 black cars stopped in front of the notary building, lights flickering, softly on the glass. Inside the conference room, the air felt dense, like there wasn't enough oxygen. 4 of them sat in a row. Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor, each with a different look, but all with the same thing underneath. Fear, badly hidden under fake calm. Renee sat across from them, stacking documents neatly. I sat beside her, quiet, hands on the table's edge. In front of us, 2 officers and a representative from the Maine Attorney General's office watched. The formal confrontation began. Renee started by playing the recording they thought they'd erased yesterday. Brittany's voice came first, thin, sharp. Sell the house, fast. If we wait, her papers expire, and we'll have to redo everything. Derek's voice cut in. I've done the math. 60% from the house, 20% from savings, 20% from company shares. We split it, and no one says a word. Then Alana, shaky but clear, as long as the guardianship has Dr. Pierce's signature, everything's legal. The words rang in the dead quiet room. I didn't look at them. I stared at the screen. Each sentence was a blade now driven back into the mouths that formed them. When the audio stopped, Renee said gently, "That was the first excerpt. Now, the financial evidence." She opened the second set. Bank statements, rows of numbers, transfers into Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. $480,000 moved from Mrs. Carver's accounts while she was under treatment. Here's the boat deposit for Derek, Brittany's diamond receipt, and bank login IP history from the Portland address. Sweat beaded on Derek's lip. I don't know about that. Could be a system error. Renee slid one more page over. What about this internal email? From Connor Reeves. Subject: Need to mask the transfers, code them as medical costs. Connor went chalk white, head down. I just followed instructions. Derek said it was temporary. Renee didn't answer. She signaled an officer to note it. I watched their faces crumple, one by one the children I raised and taught manners, now ducking their mother's eyes like midday thieves. Suddenly, Derek shoved back his chair and dropped to his knees in front of me. Mom, we were wrong. We were scared you'd be alone, scared something would happen without us there. So we tried to control things. I looked at my son once, a source of pride, now a hollow ache. Afraid I'd be alone, I repeated, voice tight. So you killed me on paper? Forged medical records? Declared me incompetent? Then split the money? That's your version of love? He broke down, but I had no tears left to share. Brittany cut in, hissing through her teeth. I just did what my husband said. He said it was for your benefit. Renee gave a small smile and picked up a tablet, pressing play. Brittany in a living room, wineglass in hand, telling friends, finally no more toxic mother-in-law. I feel like a boulder's been lifted. The laughter in the video echoed around the room, harsh and cold. Brittany shot to her feet, face blazing. It was a joke! I didn't know anyone recorded it. The security camera in your home did, Renee said. And it was uploaded 24 hours before Mrs. Carver passed away. The room fell silent again. Only the sound of wind slipping through the door crack, the smell of fresh ink, and the tang of nervous sweat remained. Alana, my daughter, spoke through a tremor. Mom, I didn't do anything. I was just worried about the kids. If this blows up, they'll be affected. You love your grandkids, right? I looked at her, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. Which grandmother did you make them mourn, Alana? Their real grandma, or the shadow you created to legitimize your filings? Alana burst into sobs, but I didn't move closer. Those tears were no longer apologies, just fear as the walls of calm, lies collapsed. Renee opened the medical file and set out 2 versions, one original, one fake. Here is Dr. Nolan Pierce's signature on the real report diagnosis. Normal cognition. And here is the fake one Derek submitted. Moderate decline. If you compare the signatures, you'll notice something interesting. She placed the pages side by side. Even a person who couldn't read would see it. The handwriting was identical right down to the final ink dot. Renee only smiled. He used the same pen, the same handwriting, the same typo from last month's prescription. A sloppy doctor, a foolish scheme, and enough to put all 4 of you in prison. Derek clenched his fists, snapped. What do you want from us? Renee stayed calm. Not me, Mrs. Carver. I looked at my son, lowered my voice, each word dropping heavy. I want one thing, truth and justice. Right then, Renee's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then nodded to the officer. The freeze orders are now in effect. Every account, asset, and company tied to you is locked. The police are ready to take statements. Brittany shot to her feet, screamed, No! I have small children! I can't, the officer replied evenly. You'll be allowed to call an attorney. The air thickened. I sat still, watching each of them grasp at flimsy excuses. Alana collapsed into her chair, face in her hands. Derek fell quiet, eyes drifting. Renee turned to me and murmured, You can choose. We can push full criminal charges, or you can set civil conditions if you want to leave a way back. I thought for a moment. Then I spoke clearly. I'll choose the lighter path if they accept 3 conditions. She nodded, signaling the prosecutor to record them. I continued. 1. Repay every dollar taken. 2. A public apology in court and to the media, admitting wrongdoing. 3. Mandatory therapy for at least 6 months to learn what remorse means. The room went dead still. Derek looked around, then shouted like a plea. No, you want to humiliate us? I answered softly, but each word cut through the air. No, I want you to face yourselves. That's what I taught you, and you forgot. Brittany stood, voice choked. We won't apologize publicly. Do whatever you want, sue us. I held her gaze for a long second, then nodded slowly. Fine. Then I'll see you in court. Renee gathered the files and signed the minutes. The police began escorting them out one by one to take separate statements. As Derek passed me, he stopped, eyes full of desperation. Mom, if you do this, I lose everything. I looked at him, offered a small, aching smile. You chose to lose me first, Derek. This is just the consequence. The door closed. Only I, Renee, and the pale gold light through the blinds remained. I sat quietly, no longer angry, holding a feeling I could barely name, exhaustion mixed with peace. Renee rested a hand on my shoulder and said gently, You just won the first battle. I answered softly, No, Renee. I just won my name back. Winning or losing, that's the court's job. I stood and looked out the window. The snow had melted. Boston sunlight washed the building across the street. In that moment, I understood that sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a gavel strike. It arrives when the person buried alive stands up and says, clearly and loud, I'm still here. 2 months after the confrontation at the notary office, Boston was still cold, but I'd grown used to this kind of cold yet clear, like justice coming into focus. They hadn't. My entire family was now officially defendants in a case for fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and money laundering through Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. Things I used to only hear on the news had become my real life, Renee told me, calm but firm. Prepare yourself, Sylvia. The first hearing will be heavy, but what you say isn't for revenge. It's to end a chain of lies. I nodded. I didn't shake anymore. The indictment ran nearly 40 pages. First was Derek Carver main counts, forged notarization, asset theft, abuse of trust against an elderly person, and interstate money laundering. Then Brittany accomplice, evidence concealment, and profiting from fraud. Connor set up a shell company and helped legitimize the money flow. Alana indirect accomplice, but considered for leniency due to cooperation. And then the name that chilled me, Dr. Nolan Pierce, the man who once shook my hand in his exam room, smiling, You're still sharp, Sylvia, was now under a federal investigation list. The U.S. Medical Investigations Bureau found that within 8 months, he received 11 consulting fees from the shell firm Reeves Accounting, each exactly $7,500. Every payment matched the windows when Derek needed medical reports to finalize guardianship. Miguel sent me a memo, payments disguised as expert consults for elderly patients, no supporting medical records. Funds transferred directly from an account managed by CFO Connor Reeves. The American Medical Association immediately suspended Nolan. Former patients spoke up, saying he often copied diagnoses literally copy-paste from other charts. A 79-year-old woman said, He labeled me early dementia when I came in for joint pain. Reading that hurt and relieved me. It wasn't just me, many older people had been prey in a diagnosis-for-profit system. Derek hired an expensive New York attorney, a salt-and-pepper man with an oily, smooth voice. In front of cameras, he claimed his benefactor was a victim manipulated by a greedy wife. It was all Brittany, he said. She controlled my client's emotions to seize the mother-in-law's assets. Brittany hit back. She appeared in black, face wet with tears, declaring, Derek forced me to sign. I did it because I was afraid of him. I had no power. Connor, the quietest one, was nailed by his own emails. One line was read aloud in court. Don't worry, Derek. I'll mask that transfer under your mom's medical expenses. Running it through the LLC will cover it. Those words landed like hammer blows. Only Alana, my daughter, bowed her head and admitted it. During her statement, she said in a shaking voice, I knew they were wrong, but I didn't dare speak up. I was afraid of losing my family, my job. I just wanted Mom to be safe, the prosecutor asked. Safe by declaring her dead? Alana broke down. then signed a partial plea, handing over all family group emails and messages. When Renee showed me those emails, I sat still for over an hour. Some lines made it hard to breathe. Let her think it's a vacation. When it's done, she won't have any rights left. Sell the house fast before she changes her mind. Each word was a nail driven into me. Still, I signed to submit them to the court. Renee and Miguel worked non-stop. They compiled everything I had: journals, recordings, photos, and Richard's letter where he wrote, "All of this was built by Sylvia. I only added a little." The house and savings are the result of 40 years of her work. That letter in my husband's hand became a key legal anchor. Proof the assets were my separate property, not communal property my children could claim. The court granted temporary restitution and restraining orders. None of the defendants could contact me or come within a mile of me or my home. I walked back into my house, the old door creaked its familiar note, and for the first time in months, I felt true peace. A week later, Renee sent me the iCloud extraction from Derek's phone. There was an 18-minute video from our home camera the night I was taken on vacation. They stood in the living room, pulling drawers to inventory. Brittany said plainly, "I'm taking this bracelet. Sell the watch." Derek replied, "Write it all down so there's no questions. She won't remember anyway." They all laughed. Renee looked at me, voice low. "This is evidence of intent to misappropriate assets. There's nothing left to argue." I nodded gently, said nothing. What I felt wasn't anger, just a heavy sadness at how ambition can make people foolish. As for Nolan Pierce, the man in the white coat behind the paper trying to bury me, there was no exit left. The FBI found, beyond the 11 payments of $7,500, 2 larger ones routed through Blue Ledge Ventures marked consultation, legal coordination, Miguel explained. "That's how they laundered it," Nolan signs, "fake medical records. Connor pays under consulting. The medical board launched formal discipline. Dozens of patients filed complaints." On the evening news, cameras caught Nolan leaving court, white coat folded over his arm, eyes to the ground. I wanted to close that chapter, but justice doesn't let you soften too soon. Renee filed supplemental charges: falsifying medical records and conspiracy to defraud an elderly person. Nolan became a separate defendant in a second branch of the case. On the first day of trial, I walked in with my short silver hair and the gray coat Renee told me to keep because you look stronger in it. Across the aisle, Derek stared at me with empty eyes. Alana kept her head down. Brittany wouldn't look up. Connor stayed quiet. When the judge asked, "Mrs. Sylvia Carver, are you healthy and lucid enough to testify today?" I smiled and spoke clearly, each word etched in the air. "Your Honor, I'm 71 years old. My memory still serves, my eyes can still read, and my heart still knows pain. I'm lucid enough to love and clear-sighted enough to know when I've been betrayed." The courtroom went still. I told my story, no tears, no theatrics, just facts, day by day, act by act. I spoke about the birthday night, the pen-scratching percentages, the flight to Lisbon, and the moment I heard my own children say, "Split the assets when she dies." No one interrupted. Even the defense had nothing left to argue. When I finished, the judge said only one line. "To those who claimed Mrs. Carver was incompetent, you've just heard and seen the opposite." I turned to Renee. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "The strongest blow isn't revenge, Sylvia. It's standing steady before those who tried to crush you." I nodded. I knew justice had a way to go, but the hardest part I had already walked. The rest would be theirs, the ones who thought money could buy the truth. The morning snow fell lightly, white dusting the courthouse steps like winter's mourning cloth. But inside me it was a morning of light, no more pain, only clarity. More than a year after that fateful birthday, I entered court for the last time, not as the ward, but as the plaintiff who reclaimed her name. The gallery hushed as the judge read the verdict. His voice was low and firm. Defendant Derek Carver fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and interstate money laundering 8 years in prison. Brittany Carver accomplice to fraud, aiding and concealing illegal assets 6 years in prison. Connor Reeves accomplice to money laundering, establishing a shell company, falsifying tax reports 5 years in prison, and barred from accounting for 10 years. Alana Reeves indirect accomplice, cooperated with the investigation, suspended sentence of 3 years and 1,200 hours of community service at a Maine nursing home. I heard each number like dry knocks against the walls of memory. No joy, just the sense that fairness had finally been named. Then the judge continued, Dr. Nolan Pierce for falsifying medical records and conspiring to defraud an elderly person, permanent loss of medical license, suspended sentence of 2 years and civil penalties of $350,000. He is also ordered to issue a public apology. Reporters swarmed as court adjourned, wanting the face of the mother who survived her own death certificate. I said only one short sentence. Justice isn't for revenge, it's to remind us that trust isn't for sale. A week later, the court ordered restitution and civil damages. Derek's boat was liquidated, Brittany's diamond ring auctioned, and Blue Ledge Ventures assets seized. Everything converted to money, more than $3.6 million, including principal, interest, and emotional damages for me. When Renee handed me the check in an envelope, she smiled. You didn't just get the money back, Sylvia. You got yourself back. I looked at the check, but felt only quiet. Not because of the number, because of being seen and restored as the truth. My house in Portland was restored too. I returned on a light, rainy afternoon. The old wood smell and dried cinnamon were the same. I changed the locks, the nameplate at the gate, and placed the new deed into a protective trust so no one, not even me, could lose it so easily again. That night I sat in the living room where arguments once echoed, where I once stood behind a door and heard my children plan to split the assets when she dies. Now there was only the soft tick of the fireplace and candlelight on my husband's photo. Richard, I whispered, I did it, and not with hatred. A month later, I accepted an invitation from the Maine Council for the Protection of Older Adults. They wanted me to speak at a community event to share my story as a warning. That day the hall was small but warm. Over 100 seniors listened closely, some holding hands, some wiping tears as I told the path I'd walked from a quiet birthday to a blazing courtroom. At the end of the event, an elderly woman, around 80, walked up and held my hand, trembling. Thank you, Sylvia. I used to think I was foolish for not speaking up when my son controlled all my accounts. Now I know it's never too late to protect myself. I smiled. And that very night, I wrote a small document 12-point checklist to protect older adults as my promise to them. 1. Always keep at least one separate account in your own name, no joint owner. 2. Make a will with an independent attorney as witness. 3. Review bank statements regularly. 4. Record or save every important medical consultation. 5. Don't sign anything if you feel pressured or hear, we have to rush this for your health. 6. Choose your own doctor and lawyer. Don't rely on referrals from relatives with financial interests. 7. Keep copies of your ID and property titles in a safe place. 8. Use two-factor authentication for online accounts. 9. Teach younger family members how to spot signs of elder abuse. 10. If you suspect something, contact an attorney or protection organization right away. Don't stay silent. 11. Keep a financial journal and a log of medical visits. 12. And last, never think you're too old to say no. I hand out that checklist for free at community meetings, and every time I see an older man or woman accept it with a smile, I feel my heart heal a little more. At the end of spring, I wrote another letter to my grandkids. I know they bear no blame for the adults' tragedy. I love you, but love has to live with truth. When you grow up, remember that wealth isn't in a safe, it lives in gratitude and honesty. Never let greed cloud your eyes. I sent that letter with an old family photo, the only one still intact. That summer, I spent a day returning to Lisbon, but this time not as someone taken away in silence, rather as a free traveler. I visited Dona Teresa at Santa Luzia. She hugged me, tears running down. "You did it, Sylvia. You made us believe justice is real again." I smiled and handed her a small radio and a bouquet of fresh orange blossoms. "So you can hear the world out there and believe someone is listening." We sat on the balcony looking over the Tagus, sunlight gilding the water. For the first time, Lisbon was truly beautiful to me, not a prison but the end of fear. Back in Maine that night, I opened a drawer and found the letter I'd written the night before the inheritance signing, the one to Richard I had never burned. I read it again and smiled. The words in it had come true. I took the letter out to the back porch, set it in a ceramic bowl, and lit it. Flames rose, eating each line, casting warm light over my aging hands. I whispered, "It's time to let the past burn out." I watched until only ash was left, then closed the door. Night wind slipped through the window frame carrying the scent of peace. Now I am no longer someone deceived, abandoned, or treated as a burden. I am Sylvia Carver, the woman who stood up from her own funeral and walked out with 2 hands full of trust again. I sat down and wrote the final line in my journal. Justice doesn't make us young again, but it lets us hold our heads high. And sometimes, that alone is a kind of miracle. After the trial and the months rebuilding my life, I knew there was one last thing to do, not to close a chapter, but to open another path for people like me. One autumn morning, with dew still on the grass out back, I called Renee. "Do you remember the first time I asked for your help?" I said, my voice lighter. Renee laughed on the other end. "How could I forget? Do you want to revise some filings?" I answered, "No, Renee. I want to write a new will." That afternoon we sat at the wooden table in my living room. I read each line slowly, my voice firm like an oath. All current assets, including real property, savings, insurance, and damages with interest, will go to the Sylvia Carver Fund, a non-profit supporting older adults who are abused by relatives, isolated, or stripped of autonomy. Renee looked up, admiration in her eyes. "Are you sure? That's enough for you to live comfortably the rest of your life." I smiled gently. I have enough. But so many are still trapped in homes that are anything but. If this money can open a door for them, that's the real asset. In that will, I left each child $1 a token, not to punish, but to acknowledge they are my blood while making clear they no longer hold power in the name of love. I included a short handwritten note for each. "My dear children, I don't harbor hatred, but I can't pretend to forget. Real love must carry responsibility and honesty. One day, when you're brave enough to look back, understand that what I leave you isn't money, but a lesson in consequences." Renee nodded softly after reading. "You know, Sylvia, those letters may change them more than any sentence." I only smiled. I don't pin my hopes on awakenings, but I trust time, the fairest judge we have. Beyond the Sylvia Carver Fund, I set up a memorial scholarship in my late husband's name, the Richard Carver Memorial Scholarship for nursing students focusing on geriatrics. He used to say, "I told Renee that caring for older adults teaches you kindness. If someone enters this field out of love, I want them to know a woman named Sylvia Carver believed in them." When all the paperwork was done, I chose to leave the big house and start a smaller, quieter chapter. I bought a little home facing Casco Bay, just 2 bedrooms and a sunny balcony. I planted 2 cherry trees out front, one for me, one for Richard, and adopted a gray cat I named Harbor because he arrived on a windy day and curled up by the porch like he wanted to be someone's safe harbor. My new routine is simple and full. Morning, I wake at 6 a.m., and paddle a kayak along the bay in the mist. Midday, I read or write for elder advocacy groups. Afternoon, I practice. Watercolor, mostly Lisbon scenes, once a symbol of fear, now a symbol of freedom. Evening, I brew tea, open my laptop, and answer letters from strangers. Some ask how to find a lawyer, some just want to share that their grandkids don't call anymore. Each letter is a life, and I answer with all the patience I have. I learned something new too, how to cook Portuguese food. First dish, bacalhau à brás salt cod mixed with eggs and crisp potatoes. I learned the recipe from Dona Teresa, my friend at Santa Luzia. With the first bite, I remembered leaving the facility and her words, "Do what we didn't dare demand justice." Now the dish isn't tied to fear, it's gratitude. I call it the freedom dish. Every Sunday I go to a local church where the pastor leaves time at the end for community sharing. I tell my story not to seek pity, but to remind people, saying no isn't a lack of love. Sometimes it's the only way to keep love from becoming a weapon. Afterward, many elders come hold my hand for a long time. Some just cry. They don't need to speak. I understand because I've been in that place where your voice gets swallowed by family silence. One early winter evening, I sat on the porch watching moonlight ripple across the bay, harbor curled under my chair. I thought about the years behind me and finally realized the hardest thing to forgive wasn't others' wrongs, it was not forgiving myself. I had believed the wrong people for too long and blamed myself for being weak. Now I know, weakness isn't a crime, only staying down is. I won't forgive cruelty, but I forgive myself, the woman who once believed kindness alone could hold a family together. That night I wrote in my notebook, I wasn't born strong. I learned strength after almost being erased from my own life. And I knew this is the story I want to leave behind, not just as a memoir, but as a map for anyone lost in fear. Renee helped me plan an open resources release, all forms, hotlines, support organizations, and the 12-point checklist, shared free through a nationwide elder network. I set the release date for March 20th, exactly 2 years after my 71st birthday, the night everything seemed over but actually just began. That evening, after finishing the plan, I stepped onto the balcony. The lighthouse beam swept the bay. A light breeze carried the smell of salt. I spoke softly to Richard, as if he were beside me. See, we don't have to fear losing anymore. In the end, the only thing we keep is what we give away. Harbor rubbed my leg and meowed once. I smiled. In the end, my life found both justice and peace again. Early morning, the ocean breeze from Casco Bay blew across the porch, carrying salt and distant gulls. I poured a cup of black coffee, opened my worn notebook, and wrote the first line of my new book. A Guide to Preserving Dignity in Old Age, What I Learned After Nearly Being Erased from My Own Life. My pen trembled lightly, not from age, but emotion. I'm not writing as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who crossed the ravine of betrayal and returned with self-respect intact. In the middle of the first page, I drew a small circle for the sea, always changing, never lost. My life is the same. Waves can strip away reputation, but if we stand up, dignity returns like the tide. The breeze flipped a few old pages notes from the road I'd walked. I thought of Dona Teresa, who hugged me on my last day in Lisbon and said, "Live for those who no longer have the chance to stand." I thought of Lisbon, once a nightmare, now a landmark of freedom. But more than anything, I thought of the woman in the mirror, the one who didn't fall when the world thought she was dead. Each morning I smile at her, not to find youth, but to greet an old friend. Thank you for not giving up. This afternoon I sat in a sunlit room, opened my laptop, and rebuilt the Climb birthday night stage in words. I'm not writing to dwell on pain, but so others, those being abused, controlled, deceived, can see there's a way out. I described every detail: the pen scratching on paper, my daughter-in-law's icy voice, my son's empty nod, and finally, the moment I hit record, small act, life-changing result. I wrote slowly, line by line, like opening a door to light for someone else to walk through. On the shelf, Richard's photo smiled, his eyes catching the late sun. I said softly, "See, I'm home now, not just in this wooden house, but in the house of trust and justice." I walked through the house, checked windows, rearranged books and paintings, then locked the front door. I set the key ring in a small wooden box Richard had carved with the words, "Home is a choice." It's the symbol of the autonomy. I took back the right to decide how I live, who I trust, and where I stop. In the afternoon, I opened my laptop. My inbox filled with messages from everywhere. A woman in Texas weighing whether to remove her son from a joint account. A man in Florida saying my story gave him the courage to call the police after years of threats. I read them all and answered each one in the voice I once needed myself. Gentle but firm. Every line is a life. I realize strangers can understand me better than the family who betrayed me. Through them, I know I didn't just survive, I became a voice for those who were silent. At dusk, I stepped onto the balcony, where the sea turned a pale bronze. The last light sprinkled the water like glitter. I closed my eyes, breathed in the salt, and let my mind drift with the waves. I understood that true legacy isn't money, it's how we make wrongdoing, bow and goodness stand tall. I once had millions, then lost everything only to receive what matters most, freedom of the soul. If someone asks whether I regret anything, I'll say no. Without those losses, I'd never have learned the strength of reborn trust. Night fell. I set the laptop on the table and moved my fingers slowly. On the screen was the end of the manuscript. I typed the closing line. Preserving dignity in old age isn't just about protecting assets, it's about protecting your soul in life's storms. Then I saved and hit send draft to the publisher. Offshore, waves beat the rocks like a wordless song. I smiled, feeling the ocean blessing my journey. I whispered to myself, "This isn't an ending. It's the first chapter of peace." I closed the laptop, poured a little red wine, and leaned back in the wooden chair. The sea breeze lifted my silver hair, and Harbor, my small cat, slept at my feet. Everything was quiet, just enough to hear my heartbeat. Slow, steady, at peace. I looked up at the night sky, no clouds, only the moon and thousands of stars. Somewhere out there, someone is hearing this story, maybe a mother, a grandfather, or someone just learning how not to fall. And if they are, I want to say this: you're not alone. Even if you've been deceived, forgotten, or treated as a burden, you still deserve respect, trust, and love. If this story touched your heart, tell me where you're listening from. Every comment you leave is like a small light on a map, showing older people out there, those who feel lonely, hurt, or overlooked, that they are not walking alone. I want to thank you for staying to the very end, for listening to a woman who was pushed into the dark and chose to stand up anyway. A like, a comment, or a subscription won't just help this video travel, it will help other silent voices be found. If today this story made you cry, smile, or simply sit in quiet thought, then I believe that somewhere kindness still lives, and together we're keeping it alive.
You can't sit with us. Mommy said you're just a useless old freeloader. My 9-year-old granddaughter Lily said that in front of the entire family, right in the middle of my son Michael's birthday dinner. What hit me wasn't the insult itself, but the sound of my own child laughing at it. I stood up, trying to keep my back straight, even as my chest tightened like someone was squeezing it. No one apologized. No one stopped her. That night, Michael texted me a single sentence: "Mom, tomorrow is the usual payment deadline." And I replied, "Handle it yourself." They didn't know that, from that moment on, I had opened the door to the biggest reversal of their lives. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like, so it can reach even further. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I'm 66 years old and live in a quiet little town in Oregon. My white wooden house with the wide front porch is where I raised my 2 boys and where I once imagined I would grow old peacefully, surrounded by the laughter of family. But it turns out everything I spent my whole life building could collapse in an instant created by the very people I loved most. That day was Michael's 41st birthday. The little blonde boy I once carried is now a grown man with a wife, a child, and a family I always thought I still belonged to. I had woken up at 6 a.m. to prepare the dinner. I roasted honey-glazed chicken, Michael's childhood favorite, made coleslaw, and baked a red velvet cake using the exact recipe he once said was the best in America. I cleaned every corner of my kitchen, polished the silverware, and laid out a navy blue tablecloth, his favorite color since high school. I poured my whole heart into that meal, not because I wanted gratitude, but because I loved my son, loved this family so much that I sometimes forgot I also deserved respect. At exactly 3 p.m., Michael and Vanessa's shiny black SUV pulled into my driveway. I smiled, my heart fluttering with a fragile hope that maybe today would feel warm, like the old days. But the first person to step out, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, shattered that hope immediately. She lowered her sunglasses, scanned my house like she was assessing a free temporary shelter. "Oh, wow, you actually cleaned today," she said, her voice cold even though her lips curved into a polite smile. I simply replied, "I always keep the house clean. You just don't notice." Vanessa didn't care. She walked inside as if entering a convenience store, eyes glued to her phone, leaving Michael to carry everything. Lily, only 9, walked in last, shaking her brown curls and giving me a look no child should have, unless someone taught her to. I bent down and opened my arms. "Hi, Lily, sweetheart, come give Grandma a hug." She stepped back half a step, wrinkling her nose as if I had offered her something dirty. I swallowed that sharp, stinging feeling in my chest and stood up. "It's okay," I told myself. "Kids can be unpredictable." But I was wrong. I was naive to the point of foolishness. When we sat down at the table, Vanessa crossed her legs like a queen, not lifting a finger to help. Michael looked at his phone more than he looked at me. The only sound was the faint clinking of silverware in my warm, quiet kitchen. I tried to start a conversation. "Lily, how's school? Grandma misses you." Without looking up, she replied, "Mommy says Grandma asks too many questions." I heard Vanessa chuckle, and Michael gave an awkward, embarrassed smile, but said nothing. He didn't correct his daughter. He didn't ask his wife to be respectful, not one word. When I brought out the red velvet cake, candles glowing on top, I hoped the atmosphere would soften. I thought the moment of blowing out candles might spark some warmth. I thought my son would look at me the way he used to, as the woman who tucked him into bed every night. I thought wrong again. Just as I sat down to join them in singing, Lily suddenly stood up, turned to me, and said clearly, "You can't sit with us. Mommy said you're just a useless old freeloader." The cake nearly slipped from my hands. Vanessa burst out laughing. But what tore me apart was Michael's quiet laugh, the one I would hear again in my sleep for nights afterward. The room spun. I stood up slowly so I wouldn't collapse. "Good," I told myself. "Don't cry in front of them. Don't let them see you hurt." I walked into the kitchen. Before the door even swung shut, I heard them go right back to laughing, talking, as if they hadn't just shattered someone's heart in the same room. I leaned against the sink, my hands gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. On the wall, there was a photo of Michael at 4 years old, smiling brightly in his little beach outfit. I stared at that picture and wondered when my son had become a stranger. That night, after everyone left, I cleaned each plate smeared with frosting, each glass with their fingerprints on it. My house went quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes an older woman feel alone. My phone buzzed. Michael. Mom, tomorrow is the usual payment deadline. The usual payment, meaning the money I had quietly wired into his account every month for 3 years, so he could keep up appearances with Vanessa, so his family never lacked anything, so Lily could attend private school, so Vanessa could carry a new designer handbag every season. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed 3 words, handle it yourself. And for the first time in 15 years as a single mother, I felt peaceful. Not because I saw my future, but because I finally saw theirs. I, Evelyn Brooks, had lived my whole life for my children. I once believed that's what a mother must do, but that birthday dinner woke me up. Love is not meant to be stepped on. I turned off the living room lights and walked up the creaky stairs to my bedroom. Each step echoed softly like the sound of a chapter closing. No one knew that as I sat by my window looking out at my winter garden, I was already thinking one thing. If they see me as a burden, then let's see how long they last without that burden. And I made a silent promise to myself. They would have to relearn their entire lives from the very lesson they began with ungratefulness. I didn't know that night that this small decision would trigger a domino effect, shaking the entire family, toppling illusions, revealing truths even I never expected. But I knew one thing for certain. That day was the day I stopped being dismissed and started reclaiming my life. The next morning, I woke just as the first light hit the pine trees behind my yard. I still heard Lily calling me a freeloader in my head, but strangely, the sting had hardened into something like a thin sheet of ice, cold but strong, protective. I put on my sweater, went downstairs, brewed my black coffee, and sat at my usual spot by the window, the place where every morning I watched the world move slowly. But that morning, the world didn't move slowly at all. My phone buzzed nonstop, tearing right through the quiet. I knew who it was, but I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 5th call, I finally answered. Michael's voice exploded through the line, shaky and frantic. Mom, why is my account negative? The bank says I'm short almost $3,000. Vanessa's car won't take gas. Her card got declined. Mom, what's happening? I took a sip of coffee, watching the steam drift across the window. Oh, are you sure you called the right person? I'm just the useless old freeloader. What do I have to do with this? Michael went silent. I heard his breathing quicken. Then, from somewhere behind him, a sharp shout. Michael, you said your mom put money on my card. They declined it. I had to leave my coffee. It was Vanessa, sharp, shrill, panicked. I smiled faintly. I had never been this calm. You heard her, I said gently. A burden has no financial obligations. Mom, this isn't funny. The house payment is due. Bills are piling up. Oh, the house? I interrupted. The one I paid 80% of the down payment for? A gulp. Footsteps. Maybe he was walking to a quieter corner. Mom, what are you saying? You paid for us? I walked to my wooden cabinet, took out a red folder, and set it on the table. Michael, do you know what I've been paying for these past 3 years? I pulled out each document, reading them like a grocery list. The mortgage, the cars, insurance, Lily's private school tuition, both of your credit cards, roof repairs, summer camp, Your Colorado trip last year." The line went dead silent. "I did all that because I love you, because I didn't want Vanessa to look down on you, but I see now I was completely wrong." Michael stammered, "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? Why should I? You're a grown man, Michael. You have a family, responsibilities. I thought helping a little would give you confidence." I paused. Turns out I only fed a habit. Just then, Vanessa grabbed the phone. "Lily is just a kid. She didn't mean it. Why are you blowing this up?" I laughed, a short, sharp laugh. Kids repeat what they hear. Children don't come up with insults for their grandmothers on their own. Vanessa went silent immediately. I continued, "Do you know why Lily spoke that way, Vanessa? Because she heard it at home, because you said it, because Michael didn't correct you. I don't blame Lily, but I will not tolerate the disrespect of adults." Michael's voice returned, desperate. "Mom, the bank is really going to take the house. I need you to—" "No, Michael." This time, my voice was stone. "Yesterday, you watched your daughter insult me. You laughed. When a mother is treated that way, no one has the right to ask her for anything." I heard him choke, a small, broken sound. I placed the papers down and flipped to the printed statements. "These are all the payments I made. You can come see them any time, but listen carefully. From today on, I'm not paying a single cent more. You and Vanessa have 24 hours to do one simple thing: apologize, properly. If not, all support ends, permanently." On the other end, I heard Vanessa cry, not in remorse, but in fear of losing her lifestyle. Michael sounded like the weight of the sky had fallen on him. "Mom, you can't do this. I can't fix this on my own." "Michael," I said softly yet firmly, "I fixed everything my whole life. Now it's your turn." I paused, letting the next words land. "If you see me as a burden, then you must learn to live without that burden." A long silence followed, then a slammed door, a yell, Michael calling after her. I breathed in slowly. My kitchen glowed with soft morning light. My coffee was still warm. For the first time, I felt free. My pain hadn't vanished, but it had hardened into resolve, into steel. For 3 years, I supported a family that never thanked me. I protected Michael's pride. I let them build an image of me as an endless resource. That ended this morning. I set down my cup and closed the folder. Sometimes, to stand firm, an older woman doesn't need anyone behind her. She just needs to say enough. And that morning, for the first time in 66 years, I did. Michael called 2 more times, but I didn't answer. They needed time to face themselves, to understand that everything in life has a price, including a mother's kindness. And in that silence, something became incredibly clear. I owed them nothing, but they owed me an apology I would never forget if it didn't come. I clicked the folder shut, a soft, decisive sound, like a door closing, and another one opening. A door leading to a confrontation they never imagined I had the strength to walk into. I didn't have to wait long. Just before noon the next day, the sound of a car slamming its brakes echoed across my yard, sharp and dry like a warning. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out the window. Michael stepped out of the driver's seat, exhausted, his clothes wrinkled, his hair flat and oily like someone who hadn't slept all night. But Vanessa was different. She stomped her high heels on the tile steps of my porch, pushed open my front door without even knocking, as if this place belonged to her. "We need to talk," Vanessa said, her voice sharp as a thin blade. Michael stood behind her, avoiding my eyes. I didn't invite them to sit right away. I wanted to see how they intended to begin this conversation, but clearly, apology wasn't in their vocabulary. Vanessa crossed her arms, tilted her head with challenge. You cut off the money without warning. That's unreasonable. I want to know why. I raised an eyebrow, swallowing a sigh. Why? You two don't see the reason. Michael awkwardly sat down on the sofa while Vanessa remained standing as if she needed the higher position to protect her crumbling ego. Mom, Michael said quietly, we really need you to explain. Suddenly all the payments stopped. I can't handle... I cut him off. You said suddenly? Michael, you don't remember what happened last night? Vanessa let out a mocking laugh. If you did this to prove you have power, it didn't work. We're not scared. I looked straight at her. Oh, then who's handling the frozen credit cards? Who's paying this month's mortgage? Lily's tuition that's waiting for a signature? Your SUV running out of gas on the road? Who's filling the tank? The confidence on Vanessa's face cracked. She shot Michael a look as if blaming him. I quietly pulled the red folder from the dining table and placed it in front of them. A solid thump filled the room. Good. Let me help you explain. I opened the folder. On the table were detailed statements of every expense from the past 3 years. Receipts, bank transfers, tuition bills, car insurance, home repairs, even the receipt for the leather jacket Vanessa bragged about on Instagram. I pushed a stack of papers toward them. From the milk Lily drinks every week to your Colorado trip, all of it, I paid. Michael reached out with shaking hands to pick up a sheet. Vanessa froze in place, her skin turning visibly pale. She tried to force a weak smile. This must be some misunderstanding. Michael never said you paid. Yes, I said evenly, because Michael was ashamed. My son has been lying to you for 3 years. Michael quickly shook his head, then dropped his hands, as if he no longer had the strength to deny it. Vanessa, I didn't have a choice. I just wanted you to think I was capable. I was afraid, if you knew... What does that mean? Vanessa burst out, turning to me. Lily is just a kid. She talks nonsense. Don't use a child's words to make things difficult for us. I leaned back in my chair, watching her for a long moment. Children repeat what adults teach. She didn't come up with the phrase, useless old freeloader on her own. You might forget that kids hear more than adults think. Vanessa went silent. Her face shifted into an odd shade of red. Part anger, part shame, part fear. I took a soft breath and said clearly, You two said you needed to talk, so do I. First, bring Lily in here. Immediately, Vanessa reacted as if touched on an open wound. No, she's not involved. She's sitting in the car. Whatever you want to say it to us. I knew exactly what she was afraid of, that her daughter's own words would expose the attitude she had been hiding. Vanessa, I said, my voice light but sharp, a child only repeats how their parents treat others. If we don't talk to Lily now, she'll grow up thinking it's normal to insult her grandparents. She clenched her teeth. I'm not letting you brainwash my daughter. Michael raised a hand as if to calm both sides. Mom, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have laughed. I shouldn't have stayed quiet. No, Michael. I looked straight at my son. You didn't just laugh. You allowed all of it. You let your daughter believe cruelty is acceptable. You taught her that through your silence. Michael lowered his head, his shoulders collapsing as if years of weight had fallen onto him all at once. Vanessa crossed her arms and lifted her chin. Fine. If you want us to apologize to get the money back, we're not doing it. We can handle things ourselves. We don't need your charity. Oh? I tilted my head, unable to hide my smile. Handle things? Vanessa, Do you know how much is left in Michael's account right now? $37. Your credit card is 2 cycles overdue. Your car loan has the highest interest rate tier. The bank is about to send a second foreclosure notice. How exactly do you plan to handle this? Her face flamed red. We'll manage. I can get a better job. I'm not dependent on anyone. I looked directly into her proud eyes and said softly, Vanessa, you've been dependent on me for 3 years without knowing it. And the worst part is, you thought you were above everyone else. Michael rubbed his forehead, his voice breaking. Mom, I'm sorry, it's my fault. I wanted to look strong, to be the provider. I didn't think it would turn into this. I just wanted Vanessa to be proud of me. I placed one hand on the table, staying silent for a few seconds before speaking. If you want respect, you must live like someone worthy of it. You can't build love on my money. I pushed the folder toward them. Now here is my final choice. 24 hours. Either you apologize to me, clearly, sincerely, without excuses, or you two handle everything on your own starting today. Vanessa shot to her feet. I don't need that kind of money. I will take care of my family. I won't let you control us. She grabbed Michael's hand. Let's go. We'll show her we don't rely on anyone. But her steps trembled, and Michael looked like a rope pulled from both ends, between his wife's pride and the truth he couldn't outrun. When the door slammed shut, my house fell silent. Only the wind rustled through the trees outside. I sat down, resting my hands in my lap, letting my breath settle. No more hurt, no more humiliation, just one strange feeling, the feeling of someone who had restored order. I knew Vanessa wouldn't let go of her pride easily, and Michael was sinking into the dark space between shame and fear of losing everything. But I also knew one certain thing. This storm was only beginning. Some winds can only be understood when they rip the roof off someone's house. And for Michael and Vanessa, that roof had never been more fragile. That afternoon, as the sunlight fell behind the pine trees, my phone rang again. But this time, it wasn't Michael's frantic calls. On the screen was a name that softened something inside me. Jonathan. My younger son living in Seattle, almost a 4-hour flight away. Jonathan had always been the grounded one. Quiet but thoughtful, and most importantly, he had always treated me with the kind of kindness that didn't need to be shown off. I answered, Mom? His voice was low, touched with concern. What happened with Michael? He called me past midnight, crying. I've never heard him like that. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I had prepared myself to retell the story, but hearing Jonathan ask with genuine care made the ache inside me stir again, like a wound brushed too soon. Do you want to hear both sides or the truth? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. Jonathan didn't hesitate. I always want the truth from you. So I told him. Everything. From Lily's insult, Michael's laugh, the entire family walking away without realizing how deeply they had cut me. I told him about the usual payment text, about Vanessa barging into my house as if I owed them answers. I told him how neither of them apologized, only demanded to know why I had unreasonably cut the money. Silence stretched across the line. Then Jonathan spoke, slow and measured. Mom, I really don't know what to say. I had no idea Lily said that. But what Michael did, I'm so disappointed. His voice tightened. I don't blame you for cutting support. Honestly, I think you should have done it a long time ago. I gave a faint, sad smile. I know, but I always thought Michael needed time, needed the feeling of being supported to stand tall. That's not what happened, Mom, Jonathan said immediately. He relied on you to maintain an image for his wife. He relied on you to build a life he didn't earn. It's not support anymore. It's dependency. I went still. Hearing my own son say it plainly made me face a truth I had avoided for years. Jonathan continued, "To be honest, Michael needs this shock to grow up, and you need the distance so you're not taken advantage of anymore." That sentence was like a light turning on inside me. "Jonathan, if Michael calls to borrow money, what would you do?" I asked, partly curious, partly needing to know if I could trust at least one son completely. Without a second thought, Jonathan replied, "I won't give him any. Doing that would just enable him, and I won't be part of hurting you more." Maybe I had been waiting years to hear someone in my family say that. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the front yard, where the first yellow leaves of the season had begun to fall. "Thank you," I said softly, "not because you're taking my side, but because you see something I took too long to see." Jonathan's voice gentled. "Mom, you never asked for anything except respect. If someone can't give you that, they don't deserve your help." A warm wave swept through my chest. "If Michael needs emotional support, I'll still be here," I said. "But no more financial help, no more carrying everything while they sit back." Jonathan exhaled, as if releasing something he had been holding. "I support you completely. And, Mom, don't soften your heart again. You've been through enough." I let out a light laugh. "You're afraid I'll soften?" "Mom," Jonathan chuckled, "for the past 30 years, you've never understood the meaning of the word harsh. But sometimes, setting boundaries is the healthiest way to love." I stayed quiet, not because I was hurt, but because my son had just spoken straight into a part of me I didn't know anyone understood. "Don't worry," I said. "This time, I'm not stepping back." After I hung up, I sat for a long time, listening to the ticking clock in the living room. For the first time in days, I didn't feel alone in this battle. At least one of my sons was truly grown, balanced, thoughtful, and capable of love that didn't bleed others dry. I began rethinking everything. The years I spent trying to shield Michael, not realizing I was weakening him. I realized this family didn't just need a small wake-up call. They needed an upheaval, and cutting financial support was only the first stone dropped into the water. That evening, after a simple dinner of chicken soup and toasted bread, I went upstairs and opened the wooden cabinet my late husband left behind. Inside were old folders, business plans from 20 years ago, documents I had intended to organize many times but couldn't because the memories felt too heavy. I pulled out each folder: savings accounts, shares of the small real estate company my husband and I started when Michael was just out of college, papers I had never shown either of my sons because I had wanted them to stand on their own feet. But now I needed to review everything, not to help Michael or Vanessa, but to prepare the next step for myself. I sorted through each sheet, placing them back in order, feeling as though I was reorganizing my life, a life I had let others steer for far too long. When the night breeze drifted in through the window, rustling the curtains, I paused and looked out at the small forest behind my house, and I understood. For the first time in years, I was reclaiming control, not control over anyone else, but control over my own life. Something age often tricks people into believing they've lost. I closed the last folder and rested my hand on its cover. I could feel it clearly. I was stepping into a new chapter, not with a broken heart, but with strength forged from the very wounds that once cut me. Because sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who unintentionally give us the greatest gift: awakening. The next morning, a little after 8 a.m., I received a video call from Michael. But before I could pick up, the call ended. Not even 10 seconds later, my phone rang again. I knew this pattern. This was how my son called when he was truly panicking. I pressed accept. Michael's face appeared on the screen, gaunt, eyes red as if he had been crying or hadn't slept all night. "Mom!" His voice broke. "Vanessa, she left." I didn't act surprised. I set my tea down, kept my voice steady. "Tell me more clearly." Michael swallowed hard, as if his throat were filled with gravel. "Vanessa found out my real salary." He let out a strained laugh, a painful, defeated sound. "Turns out I only make enough to cover electricity, water, and some groceries. The moment you stopped helping, everything fell apart." I stayed quiet, not out of judgment, but because I wanted him to see his own reality with his own eyes. Michael continued, his voice trembling. "She said straight to my face, she didn't get married to live with a failure." Those words stabbed into my ears, even though they weren't aimed at me. I knew that kind of pain, when someone you once trusted sees you as less than your true worth. I sighed softly. "Where is Vanessa now?" "She packed her things last night, took her whole wardrobe, makeup, even the travel suitcase, then pulled Lily along. They're staying at her parents' house." His voice cracked. "Lily? She cried, but Vanessa said it was temporary, until I can prove I can provide." I closed my eyes, feeling my heart squeezed gently by an old, tired hand. Loving your child is instinct, but love doesn't mean rescuing. Michael collapsed into a chair, hands on his head. "Mom, I lost my family." It was probably the first time in my life I had seen my son so bare. No pride, no bravado, no illusions of success. Just a 42-year-old man standing in the ruins he played a part in building. I kept my tone calm, but never cold. "Michael, sometimes the truth itself will choose who deserves to stay." He looked up, eyes pleading for someone to pull him out of the hole he had fallen into. "What do you mean, Mom?" I said slowly, "the people who stay when you have nothing are the people who are truly your family." Michael went silent for a long time. His breathing blended into the hum of the ceiling fan behind him. Then he spoke, voice breaking like a defeated child. "All this time, I really thought Vanessa loved me." "You were mistaken," I replied gently, but without avoiding the truth. "Vanessa loved the lifestyle she thought you had." Michael clenched his fists, lips trembling. "I created that illusion so I wouldn't be looked down on, so I could keep my family together." I looked straight into his eyes, not to scold, but to show him what I had seen long before he did. "You can't keep a family together with borrowed money or the money I sent in secret. All you did was delay the moment they saw who you really are." Those words made Michael drop his gaze, his shoulders shaking. I didn't step forward to comfort him. I knew he had to go through this moment, had to feel the full weight of loss if he ever wanted to stand back up. After a long pause, he whispered, "Mom, all of this happened because I depended on you for too long, didn't it?" I pressed my lips together. "Yes. But it wasn't just you. Part of it was my fault, too. I tried to shield you too much, afraid you would stumble." He looked up, confused and wounded. "Mom, but that ends now," I said firmly. "From now on, you have to live your life. If there are mistakes to fix, you fix them with your own two hands." Michael froze like a statue. That afternoon, I received another message from him. "Mom, the house has nothing. I've never paid a full month of bills myself. The electric bill, the internet bill, the Honda that needed gas using Vanessa's card, which was now frozen, Lily needing lunch money for school, the fridge containing only a carton of milk that had expired 2 days ago. I read each line, and my heart tightened. But instead of rushing in to save him, I replied with one sentence. This is the first time you're living according to your real income. Consider it your starting point. 10 minutes later, Michael called again. Mom, I'm so scared. I answered with the low, steady voice of a woman who had lived long enough to understand pain and strength. Fear isn't shameful. Avoiding responsibility is. On the other end, Michael exhaled heavily. I'll try. I don't want to be the person Vanessa described. Then prove the opposite, I said. Start by paying your own bills. I heard him flipping through messy papers. Mom, there are too many. I don't know which ones to prioritize. Electricity, water, food. If you can't pay the mortgage on time, call the bank and negotiate. Everything else, cut back. You don't need to live like before anymore. Michael was silent for a long moment before asking, voice small like a child waking from a nightmare, Mom, will Vanessa come back? I answered truthfully, without adding false hope. If she loves you, she will. If she loves money, she won't. There are sentences that help people survive pain by touching the deepest part of it. That was one of them. That night, Michael sent the first screenshot of a bill he had paid himself. On the screen were the words, "Payment successful." For the first time in years, my son had done it on his own. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling as if I were watching a child take his first steps after refusing to walk for years. I only replied briefly, "Good job." No coddling, no exaggerated praise. Michael needed to learn that independence was normal, not a heroic achievement to be rewarded. In the following days, I watched his life from a distance. A house once full of noise now stood quiet. No more clicking heels from Vanessa, no more expensive perfume lingering in the hallway, no more Lily arguing with friends on the brand new iPad I had once financed. In that emptiness, I saw my son truly growing. Slowly, painfully, but undeniably. I understood one thing clearly. Breaking the dependencies I had accidentally created over the past 3 years would not be easy, but it had to be done. And the collapse of Michael's marriage was simply the inevitable consequence. Vanessa never loved Michael. She loved the income she believed he had. She loved the new car I bought. She loved the big house I paid for. She loved the generosity she assumed came from her husband. Now everything was exposed. Now the truth stood between them like a mirror no one could avoid. And I would no longer interfere. Sometimes being a mother isn't about catching your child. Sometimes being a mother means letting your son fall, so he learns how to stand on his own trembling legs. That weekend, Michael came to my house no longer in total collapse. He still looked tired, but there was a spark of life in his eyes, as if he had finally taken a full breath after years of suffocating himself. "Mom," he began as I poured tea, "I think you're right. Maybe I've never really grown up." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, for the first time without the mask he always wore. No pretending to be strong, no chasing an image of success he had invented. I gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "You're beginning now, Michael, and I'm proud of you, not because you're perfect, but because you're willing to face yourself." He lowered his head. "I'll do my best." I smiled. "Then this is only the first chapter of your new life." I invited Michael over on a quiet Sunday morning. Outside, red maple leaves dropped one by one, sounding like soft whispers of autumn. I stood in the kitchen making coffee, feeling an unusual calm. I knew the conversation about to happen would change the course of my son's life, and it was also a key step in the plan I had been quietly preparing for days. When Michael arrived, he knocked very gently as if afraid to disturb me, a hesitance I rarely saw in him. "Mom, I'm here," he said as he stepped inside, hands in his pockets, walking like a man who had just come out of a storm. I pointed to the old wooden table near the window, where I had placed a green folder, clipped with a bright brass fastener. "Sit down, Michael. I have something to give you." He looked at the folder as if it were a foreign object. "What is it, Mom?" "Open it." Michael slowly unfastened the clip. His eyes moved across the first page, then suddenly widened as if someone had pulled his hair. "Contract of employment, Brooks and Avery Real Estate Group." He looked up, mouth slightly open but unable to speak. I nodded. "That is your father's and my company." Michael froze. "But Dad was just a lumber mill worker?" I saw the innocence in his question. The truth was, my husband and I had hidden that secret well for 2 decades, not to deceive our children, but to protect them from growing up dependent on family wealth. "Your father worked at the mill until 2003, I explained slowly. "After that, he quit and focused on Brooks and Avery. We bought inexpensive lots during the recession, renovated old houses, rented them out, resold them, and kept building." Michael inhaled deeply, trying to process what he had just heard. I never knew." "That's right," I said, "because your father wanted you and Jonathan to build your own lives, not rely on inherited money, and I believed in that too." I rotated the folder toward him so he could see clearly. "You're 42 now. It's time you knew the truth." Michael looked down at the second page, a job description, Regional Property Manager, Western Division. Starting salary, a 6-figure number I knew he had never imagined. "Mom, why would you trust me with this, after everything I just put you through?" His voice shook, tangled with regret and disbelief. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at my son, a man walking into midlife with mistakes piled high like mountains, yet with a faint flicker of something still alive in his eyes, like a small ember refusing to die. "Michael," I finally said, "I'm not giving you this opportunity because you deserve it now, but because I believe you can become someone who deserves it later." He lowered his head, overwhelmed. "Mom, I don't even know how to thank you." But I lifted my hand to stop him. "This opportunity comes with a condition." Michael tensed. "What condition?" I folded my hands. On the table, my voice firm. "Vanessa is not to know." A deep silence sank into the room. Michael blinked, clearly stunned. "She can't know? But why?" I looked straight into his eyes. "Because I want to know the truth. I want to know whether your wife is with you because she loves you, or because she loves the lifestyle you pretended to have. If Vanessa comes back thinking you only earn your old salary, you will know how real her feelings are." Michael sat still like a statue. Then he reluctantly nodded. "Mom, I understand." "Good. This is a test for both of you, yourself and your wife, and I will not interfere." I pulled another sheet of paper from the folder and pushed it toward him. "This contract clearly states your responsibilities, your benefits, and the termination clause if you fail to perform." Michael read through it, then straightened his back like someone who had just regained a long-lost sense of pride. "If I don't do well," he began. "Then there will be no second chance," I continued. "I already told you. This is your last opportunity." Michael drew a long breath, lowering his head, his eyes filled with a rare determination. "Mom, I won't disappoint you again." I looked at my son and felt as if time were looping. I saw my husband's shadow behind him, the man who always believed Michael had great potential, only he had never stepped off the safety chair others placed beneath him. Perhaps if he were still alive, he would have given our son this chance too. Michael stood up, holding the folder to his chest like he was carrying a priceless gift. His voice softened, but was filled with gratitude. "Mom, thank you for still believing in me, even when I don't believe in myself." I smiled gently, though inside me was an ocean of emotion. From now on, let your actions answer everything. I will no longer hold you up. Build your own life, Michael. He nodded, firmer than ever before. I watched him as he walked toward the door, his shoulders still heavy, but his steps carrying the strength of a man who finally understood his responsibility. When the door closed softly behind him, I stood up, walked to the window, and watched his figure disappear behind the maple trees. A cold breeze swept past, lifting a few yellow leaves into the air. I knew clearly I had just set the key gear of my plan into the correct position. Michael would grow up. Vanessa would show her true nature, and my family, after years tangled like a ball of yarn, would finally reveal who truly belonged to one another. I whispered to myself, a small promise to the husband I lost. He's about to step into a new chapter, Richard. This time he has to stand on his own 2 feet. Michael left my house with determined eyes, but I knew another battlefield awaited him. Not the new job, but the confrontation with his own marriage. I didn't interfere. I simply sat by the window, watching his silhouette fade behind the trees, my fingers tightening around the cooling cup of tea. A mother must sometimes step back to see clearly who walks out of her child's life, and who clings on only for personal gain. By late afternoon, as the sky shifted into deep blue, Michael texted me, "I'm going to Vanessa's parents' house. I want to tell them about the job." I replied with just one sentence, "Tell the truth." From what Michael later described, I could picture the scene inside Vanessa's parents' grand home, a suburban mansion where everything appeared more glamorous than it truly was. Vanessa had always bragged about her stable background, using it as a shield to belittle my family. Michael stood in the large foyer. Vanessa sat cross-legged on the sofa, her phone vibrating non-stop with social media notifications. She looked up, and the moment she saw Michael, she frowned. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa's voice was sharp as a blade. Michael took a deep breath. "I have news about my job." Vanessa immediately sat upright. "A new job? Good, tell me. How much is the salary?" Not how is the job, not are you doing okay, just how much is the salary? Michael said that in that moment he realized this question had repeated itself for 10 years of marriage. He had simply never heard it clearly before. "I was appointed regional manager. The salary." He swallowed. "The starting salary is..." "How much?" Vanessa cut him off, her voice harsh like someone gasping for air. "It's an amount enough for us to live comfortably, not rich but stable." "Say the number." Michael finally had to read the figure aloud, a relatively high salary for any middle-class man. But when Vanessa heard it, she shot up as if someone had slapped her. "Not enough!" Her scream echoed from the living room to the backyard. Michael froze. "Vanessa, this is my real salary. It's a job I have to work hard for." "Not enough for me to live," she yelled. "Lily has always gone to private school. I'm used to designer brands. I'm used to weekend spas and dining out." You think that amount is enough?" Michael said that at that moment he felt something inside him crack, something that had been fragile for years. Vanessa. He searched for words, but his mouth was dry as sand. "We can adjust." "Adjust?" She laughed coldly. "Adjust to live like poor people? What can you do besides drag me down?" Lily was sitting in the corner with her doll, her big blue eyes wide. The 9-year-old didn't understand why her mother was so angry. She just looked between her parents with a confusion that could break any heart. Michael said that in his daughter's eyes, he saw something he had never seen before. Fear. "Mommy, did Daddy do something wrong?" Lily asked softly. Vanessa waved her off irritably. "Be quiet, the adults are talking." Michael felt his heart plunge into a deep pit. "Vanessa, you can't talk like this in front of her." "You think I care?" she snapped. "You have no money, that's it. I didn't get married to be the wife of a failure." That sentence was like a hammer smashing every illusion Michael had clung to. He said that in that moment, he saw their entire 10-year marriage play back like a slow-motion reel. The cold nights when she barely spoke to him, the dinners where she never asked how much he had earned, the vacations she bragged about to her friends. Michael pays for everything. Michael didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't fight back. He simply watched his wife finish packing the last 2 bags, then pull Lily to her feet. "We're going to my parents for a while." Vanessa said it like announcing the weather. "When you can prove your worth, I'll talk to you again." Then she walked out, leaving the door closing behind her like a final punctuation mark. That night, Michael called me, his voice drained. "Mom, you were right. Vanessa, she doesn't love me." A long silence. "She only loves the life she thought was mine." I didn't speak immediately. I let him sit with the silence, the kind that speaks louder than advice. Finally, I asked, "How do you feel?" "I feel empty." His voice trembled. "But I also feel like I'm finally seeing the real path in front of me." I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath. "Michael, sometimes the person who hurts you the most is the one who teaches you the most important lesson. Vanessa just showed you the truth you avoided for years." I walked to the window where the soft amber streetlights glowed against the sidewalk. "From now on, you don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to play the role of a successful man just to keep a marriage that was never real." Michael's voice broke. "Mom, I don't understand how you can stay so calm." I let out a small laugh, because I already knew the outcome, and because I've been watching from a distance. "What do you mean?" "I mean, my son, the storm with Vanessa is only beginning. She still doesn't know what I know." Michael went silent. He didn't know what I was referring to, and I wasn't planning to tell him yet. I answered lightly, like a soft breeze with the sharpness of a thin blade. "Because you are learning to face the truth, and Vanessa is about to face hers." Meaning I am letting the wind blow in the right direction. I heard Michael let out a long breath, but this time it wasn't the sound of defeat. It was the sound of a man stepping out of the shadow he had created himself. When the call ended, I stood before the mirror and looked at my face, lined with wrinkles, filled with stories, shaped by storms I had survived. I smiled. At last, every piece of my plan was moving into place. I was never someone who sought conflict, but I never allowed anyone, not even a daughter-in-law, to diminish my dignity. If Vanessa believed I would rescue her again, she was wrong, because this time I wasn't carrying anyone's burden. This time I was only directing the wind and letting the storm put every person exactly where they belonged. In the days after the confrontation between Michael and Vanessa, I kept my routine, waking early, brewing a cup of black coffee, and sitting by the window overlooking the small forest behind my house. But my heart no longer felt heavy. Once you see the true nature of things, your mind becomes strangely clear. I knew Vanessa would soon face the consequences she chose, and I knew I was ready for the next step. Not out of revenge, but out of fairness. And to give my son a lesson he would never forget. I called Brenda, my personal attorney for 18 years, a woman so sharp she could predict an opponent's next 3 moves just by reading a single line of a report. "Brenda," I said, "I need you to investigate someone's finances. His name is Derek Monroe." Brenda paused for a second, longer than usual. "Vanessa's father, correct? Any particular reason?" "I want to know the real picture of that family," I replied, as clearly as possible. Brenda asked no further questions. We had worked together long enough to understand that the things I didn't say were the ones that mattered. 3 days later, exactly at 7 p.m., the time Brenda always sent important reports, my phone lit up with a PDF file over 100 pages long. I opened it and read line by line, item by item, number by number, until my heart grew still. Derek Monroe's convenience store chain was drowning in debt, unpaid employee wages, unpaid suppliers, unpaid taxes, and most importantly, placed under expanded investigation by the IRS. Brenda added a short note, "Evelyn, he may face prison in 6 to 9 months." I sat in my chair for a long time, not out of shock, but because every missing puzzle piece had finally come together. Vanessa always bragged about how successful her father was, but it turned out her entire family lived off a thin coat of outward glamour, one that was now peeling away. They were no better than Michael at this moment, perhaps even worse. The next morning, I sent the entire file to Vanessa anonymously, a short email, no signature, with only one sentence. "The truth is not always what it appears to be." I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Brenda texted me, "Vanessa just contacted another lawyer. She's panicking now." I smiled, not out of satisfaction, just the feeling that everything was unfolding according to its own logic. No one can use money to look down on others, especially when that money does not actually exist. 2 days later, while I was watering the plants in the yard, a shiny black SUV stopped at my gate. I looked from a distance and immediately recognized the man stepping out, an expensive gray suit, a slightly crooked tie, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. Derek Monroe. He, the one who once looked down on me at Michael's birthday party, the one who said, Michael's family should learn to strive harder, the one who called me an unemployed old woman living off her son. Today he stood outside my gate, his hands clasped tightly together. I let him wait 4 minutes, not for revenge, but so he would understand that today courtesy was something he needed to relearn from the beginning. When I walked out to open the gate, Derek immediately bowed his head. "Mrs. Evelyn, please give me a few minutes." His voice trembled, completely different from his former arrogance. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my tone calm. Derek took a deep breath. I'm asking you to help Michael and Vanessa reconcile. My daughter, she's falling apart. Everything happened too fast. I know she hasn't behaved properly, but please, give them a chance. I folded my arms, leaning lightly against the gate. You came to ask me that? After everything your family has said to me all this time? Derek bit his lip, lowering his head even further. I know. I was wrong. I misjudged you. But now is not the time to talk about the past. I just hope you can open your heart a little. Open my heart? I repeated, tilting my head slightly. An interesting phrase, especially coming from someone who's in trouble with the IRS. Derek turned pale. Clearly he understood that I knew the truth. I didn't come here to argue. He tried to remain composed. I came to beg. Vanessa will collapse if her marriage falls apart, and Lily as well. I let the silence stretch. Silence is what makes people reveal the truth. Finally, I said, "All right, I'll sit down and talk, but the rules are set by me." Derek looked at me, his expression mixed with relief and fear. "Thank you. I appreciate it." I neither nodded nor smiled. I simply turned, opening the gate just enough. "Go home and rest. When I'm ready, I'll contact you." Derek nodded repeatedly, then hurried back to his car, as if standing in front of me was a weight too heavy for him to bear any longer. When the SUV left the neighborhood, I stood in the yard watching the maple leaves swirl in the autumn wind. Some people think retaliation means causing immediate pain, but I'm different. I don't need to do anything. I just need to let the truth reveal itself. And the truth now was very clear. Vanessa's family was not wealthy, not stable, not powerful. They were collapsing under the shiny facade they had built. Vanessa thought Michael was the burden, but now she knows. Her own family is the bottomless pit. I walked back into the house and closed the door, feeling the wind shifting. Not too strong, not too fast, but unmistakable. Vanessa's storm was only beginning, and I, the one who had once been, dismissed, insulted, pushed away from my own son's dinner table, was now the one directing the wind, choosing the direction and the timing. I placed my hand on my chest, feeling the steady, quiet rhythm of someone who had lived through many years of hurt and finally understood that true strength is not in shouting. It lies in clarity, in knowing how to wait, and in knowing exactly when to push a door, so that the entire room behind it collapses on its own. I gave a thin smile, almost invisible in the fading light. "Vanessa," I whispered, not with malice, but like a prediction. "You've only made it through the first round." I chose a late weekend afternoon to take the next step, not for revenge, but to restore the order this family had lost. The golden light of the day slanted through the living room window, casting a long shadow on the wooden floor. I stood there, glancing at the clock, my heart calm in a way that felt unusual. Exactly at 5 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Vanessa standing on the porch. Her clothes were far simpler than before, her hair tied back hastily, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. Beside her was Lily, wearing a pink backpack, holding tightly to her mother's arm. No trace remained of the prideful woman who once looked down on me. A cold wind swept past, fluttering the hem of Vanessa's shirt. We're here," Vanessa said softly, barely daring to meet my eyes. I stepped aside, offering space. "Come in, we need to talk." Lily walked in first. The moment she saw me, she stopped, bowed deeply, and said in a trembling voice, "Grandma, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that on Daddy's birthday. I didn't know. I didn't understand." Her voice broke, her eyes shimmering with tears. I stood still for a few seconds, letting myself feel the sincerity. This time, I knew the apology wasn't forced. Children have strong intuition. When a family falls apart, they sense who truly loves them. I gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "Grandma knows. You were just influenced by adults. What matters is that now you know what's right." Lily rushed into my arms. A small hug, but enough to soften the heart of a woman who had survived many storms. Vanessa watched, her hands twisting together, her thumb rubbing her wedding ring until her skin turned white. She sat down, her shoulders slumped like someone who had lost her balance. She tried to speak, but the words came out like they were dragged over gravel. I'm sorry for what Lily said and for what I said to Michael. I sat across from her, my hand wrapped around a warm teacup. Are you sorry because you feel guilty or because you're desperate? The question made Vanessa freeze. 2 seconds of silence felt like a full minute. I saw her throat tighten as she swallowed. Both, she finally said, but I don't want my family to fall apart. I looked straight into her eyes, now void of all sharpness. Then we're going to reset the rules. I opened the folder on the table. Inside were 4 pages of documents Brenda had drafted with full clauses. This is the agreement between me, Michael, and you. I said each word clearly. 4 conditions. If you agree, I'll support your family's chance to reconcile. If not, you're on your own. Vanessa swallowed. I'm listening. I took a deep breath, then began. First, Michael must be financially independent. You may not control, demand, or require access to his paycheck. Vanessa's eyes widened. I don't control, but if he can't, I raised my hand to stop her. You need to learn to live within your real means. She bit her lip but nodded. Second, you will work part-time at my company, a basic position, basic pay, no special privileges. Vanessa shot up from her seat, nearly shouting, "You want me to work for you?" "No," I answered calmly. "I want you to relearn the value of labor. If you accept, I will pay you fairly. If not, you're free to find work elsewhere." Vanessa trembled with anger, but she didn't argue. Desperation has a way of teaching silence. Third, Lily must apologize publicly before the family. Lily looked up, worried. I stroked her hair. "Not to embarrass you, to teach you responsibility even as a child." Lily nodded hard. "I'll do it. I'll say sorry to Daddy in front of everyone." I smiled at her, a smile I rarely gave to adults. "Fourth," I said, turning to Vanessa, "you must also apologize publicly. No excuses, no deflecting, no blaming everything on Michael." Vanessa's face drained of color like I had asked her to step off a cliff. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of the family?" "No," I replied. "I want you to learn humility. And I want Michael to see that you are truly changing, not because of money." The air grew heavy. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the room, reminding Vanessa that her time was running out. Finally, Vanessa's hands dropped, and she sank back into the chair. "I agree." Her voice was as soft as the wind. I agree to everything." I didn't show triumph. I simply turned to the last page of the folder. "This is a binding contract. There are penalties if you break any of the 4 conditions." I placed the pen in front of her. Vanessa stared at it for a long time, her hand shaking so badly the cap clicked against the table. She signed, slowly, each stroke seeming to pull the air out of her chest. Once she finished, Lily ran to me, wrapping her little arms around my waist. "Grandma, I'm really sorry. I love Grandma." I bent down to hug her back. It was a hug I hadn't known I needed. I looked at Vanessa. "You know, I don't hate you. I never did. I only hated how you treated my son. But today, you have a chance to change. And so do I." Vanessa lowered, her head, her hair falling forward to hide half her face. I'll do it right. I promise." Promise. A simple word, but when spoken by someone who had lived pridefully her whole life, it weighed more than metal. I stood up, gathered the documents, and said, "Get ready. We're going to hold a family gathering. There, everyone will hear the sincere apologies, and they will witness our changes." Vanessa looked up, anxious. "When?" "Saturday evening." "That's so soon. You'll manage," I cut in, "because that is when the real test begins." I glanced at Lily, who was still holding her mother's hand. This family has a chance to heal, but it must start the right way. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, placing my hand on the wooden counter, feeling each grain the same way I felt the journey I had walked. In my heart, a quiet thought rose. The queen had fallen, but a family can rebuild if they learn to bow at the right time. I knew the public battle still lay ahead, but I was ready. And this time, I would be the one redefining the word family. Saturday evening arrived faster than I expected. All day long, I was busy preparing the garden, hanging strands of warm yellow lights along the wooden fence, setting up an extra long table with a white cloth, placing hydrangea vases I had bought at the morning farmer's market. I wanted the space warm enough for emotions to be expressed without anyone feeling judged. By 7 p.m., the lights were on and the whole garden glowed with a soft, summer-gathering kind of warmth. But no one was comfortable. The atmosphere was tight as a stretched string. Michael's siblings were there. Jonathan had flown in from Seattle, standing beside me like a quiet anchor. Vanessa's family also came, looking awkward and guarded. Her mother pulled her coat tight around her, and her father, Derek, stood still, his face heavy as stone. I watched everything in silence. Then Lily stepped out. She wore the light blue dress I gave her last year. Her small hands were clenched, her lips trembling, but her eyes, those eyes shone with the courage of a child who had gone through more upheaval than any little girl should. I gave her a small nod, and she nodded back. Lily took a deep breath, then turned toward the whole family. I'm sorry for what I said at Daddy's birthday." Her voice shook like a thread pulled too tight. "I said Grandma was a freeloader, but I didn't understand. I just repeated Mommy's words. I was wrong, really wrong." Her voice tightened. "Grandma, I'm truly sorry." The whole garden went silent, quiet enough to hear the wind move through the maple leaves. Then Lily burst into tears, a clear, piercing cry, painful but not shameful, the cry of a child beginning to understand responsibility. I walked over and held her. "Grandma forgives you, and Grandma is proud of you." Suddenly, behind us, the family began to clap, not loud applause. Soft, small, but sincere. I saw Michael's eyes turn red. Jonathan touched my shoulder gently. Even Vanessa's mother bowed her head. But everyone's attention shifted when Vanessa stepped forward. I had never seen her like this. No glossy nails, no elegant silk dress. Vanessa stood there in an old sweater and simple jeans, her face unable to hide exhaustion. She walked toward me slowly, like someone carrying the weight of an entire world. Then, before anyone could react, Vanessa sank to her knees. A wave of whispers rippled across the yard. Her parents froze. Michael was stunned, and I stood still, looking straight at her. Vanessa's voice came out hoarse and slow, each word dragged from the deepest part of her humiliation. "Evelyn, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the years I was ungrateful, disrespectful, and hurtful to you. I'm sorry I let my eyes be blinded by money and pride. I'm sorry for treating Michael like a burden." Her shoulders shook as if they might break. "I know. I've done so much wrong. I want to make things right. I want to be a better mother to Lily and a grateful wife to Michael. Please, forgive me." I heard someone inhale sharply behind me. Clearly, her parents had never imagined seeing their daughter kneel before anyone, let alone before me. The shame on their faces said everything. I let the silence stretch. Then I leaned down and placed my hand on her shoulder. "Stand up." She looked up, eyes red and wet. "I will accept this apology," I said, "if it comes with action. Words aren't enough. But today, I see a different Vanessa." I helped her rise. Once she was standing, Michael stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. She grabbed his hand like someone trying to reclaim a support she had lost long ago. Michael turned to me. His eyes were warm, a warmth like being reborn, as if his heart, buried for years under pressure, shame, and forced strength, had finally found air again. "Mom," his voice cracked, "thank you." I didn't answer, but I knew. Everything was moving in the right direction. The gathering continued, but it was completely different now. No more avoidance. No more condescending looks from Vanessa's family. No more invisible wall between the two sides of the family. Jonathan chatted with Derek, for the first time without stiffness. Lily ran around the yard, her laughter ringing like the sound of hope. Vanessa helped me serve the food, her hands still trembling a bit, but her eyes calmer than before. As she set a tray of tartlets on the table, she whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." I looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you," I replied, "for having the courage to change." At the end of the night, when everyone had left, I stood alone in the garden, watching the strands of yellow lights flicker like the house's gentle breathing. I felt something in the air that I hadn't seen in my family for a long time: warmth, respect, gratitude. But what made me happiest wasn't the apologies or the hugs. It was what was quietly beginning to grow. A lesson about self-respect, a lesson about responsibility, a lesson about the true value of a family. I looked up at the night sky where a few scattered stars were glowing. In that moment, I thought of my husband, the one who had gone before me, the one who once believed our family would find its way back someday. I whispered softly, "Richard, do you see it? Everything is finding its place again. You'd be proud of us." And I knew. Tonight, a new chapter of my family had begun. 3 months passed so quickly that sometimes I had to ask myself whether everything that happened was real or just a long dream. A dream where all the broken pieces were gathered and rearranged into something new, not perfect, but stronger. The change came from the smallest things, and those small things slowly pulled my entire family in a new direction. Michael called me almost every night not to ask for money, but to share his work updates with the quiet pride of a man standing steadily for the first time on his own ability. "Mom, today I closed the duplex in Tacoma." "Mom," my supervisor praised how well I handled the Western Division. "Mom, this month, I paid every bill myself." I sat at the kitchen table listening to him, my heart light as early season wind. No more desperate clinging, no more shame, no more slumped shoulders waiting for rescue. Michael, the son who once lived inside a shell of pride and fear of failure, was truly growing up at 42. I silently knew my husband Richard would be smiling with pride. And Vanessa. If someone had told me 3 months ago that my daughter-in-law could become a woman who listens, who thanks, and who corrects herself, I would never have believed it. But I saw it with my own eyes, little by little. She came to my company on time every day, even if it was only a part-time customer service job. In the first days, her hands shook when customers complained, but just weeks later I saw her guiding new clients, her eyes no longer arrogant but calm and patient. One afternoon, Vanessa walked into my office while I was reviewing the quarterly report. "Mom," She hesitated. Thank you, because of this job. I feel useful. I looked at her for a moment. Her face had less makeup, but it was more beautiful because of its honesty. You did it yourself, I said. All I did was push a door open. Vanessa gave a soft laugh, her eyes a bit red but full of a gratitude I had never seen in her. Lily was the biggest surprise of all. She came to my house every weekend bringing a pink apron with a cat on it that she insisted on wearing in the kitchen. She learned how to slice carrots, whisk eggs, and season salt with the kind of careful seriousness that was almost funny. But what touched me most was the sentence she said almost every week. Grandma, I love being here. I feel peaceful. A 9-year-old saying peaceful with such sincerity is rare. I knew she could feel the difference in how I treated her. No pressure, no scolding, no tension. Just quiet air, the soft sound of chopping vegetables, the smell of baked goods mixing with peppermint tea. And I realized I needed those moments with Lily more than I thought. As for Derek Monroe, Vanessa's father, the truth finally caught up to him. News of the IRS expanding its investigation spread quickly among the small business community in his area. 2 stores had to temporarily close. Another was sued by a supplier for unpaid invoices. Derek, who once held his head high in front of me, now quietly texted Vanessa, "Evelyn's son and daughter-in-law are the only ones helping us keep any shred of dignity." And then, one rainy afternoon, Vanessa came to my house, her eyes still swollen. "Mom," she said, "if you hadn't investigated and sent the documents early, we don't know what would have happened to my family. Thank you for saving us." I didn't take credit. I simply placed my hand over hers. Whether I saved you or not doesn't matter. What matters is that you learned what you needed to learn. Vanessa lowered her head. Yes. In those 3 months, I realized something precious. I no longer felt used. No one came knocking to ask for money. No one said disrespectful or belittling things to me. No one dumped responsibility on my shoulders and walked away. They came to ask my opinion, for guidance, to share small joys, big worries, or simply to sit in the kitchen and listen to me brew tea. For the first time in many years, I felt like I was in the right place. Not the family's bottomless wallet, but the head of the family, the steady center, the one who brought experience and calm. Jonathan was the first to notice. On his most recent visit, he looked around the house, saw my children talking together, saw Vanessa clearing plates, saw Lily grinning as she placed spoons into dessert bowls, then turned to me. "Mom," he said, his voice full of emotion, "you did something most people can't. You brought the whole family back on track." I laughed. "Jonathan, I just did what needed to be done." But he shook his head. "No, you did more. I'm proud of you." My heart warmed as if someone had wrapped a soft wool scarf around me in winter. Then one morning, while I was watering the tomato trellis, I suddenly realized something simple but important. My life was finally peaceful. No more quiet sobs in my bedroom out of hurt. No more silent disappointment when opening messages filled with demands. No more feeling like a burden. I had learned to love myself before loving the people I cared for. And when I did that, my family learned to do the same. Finally, I sat down on the wooden chair in the backyard, watching sunlight filter through the leaves, listening to Lily's laughter drifting out from the kitchen. Michael was showing Vanessa how to cook the pasta dish he had just learned from a coworker. Jonathan was on his way, saying he would bring an apple pie. I wondered, In all the years I spent struggling and trying to hold everything together, had I ever imagined I would see this? A family that isn't perfect, but knows how to love the right way. A family that knows how to apologize, how to correct itself, how to rise again. A family where I no longer have to endure, but can actually enjoy. I leaned my head back slightly, closed my eyes, and said softly, "Richard, everything is finally okay." And I knew this wasn't just 3 months that changed their lives. It was 3 months that changed me. There were afternoons when I sat alone on the porch, watching the golden sunlight spill across the grass like a warm blanket stretching to the end of the yard. In that quiet, I often thought about the journey of the past few months, a journey that started from a humiliating birthday party, from a sentence spoken by a child I loved, and from the laughter of my own son. Just one moment that seemed meaningless, yet enough to open an entirely new door. I thought about the version of myself that day, standing silent in the middle of the laughter, chest tight as if being squeezed, heart so empty it felt numb. And I also thought about the me of now, calm, strong, understanding my own worth more clearly than ever. I, Evelyn Brooks, am no longer the old freeloader in anyone's eyes, not because they changed what they called me, but because I changed myself. Looking back on the past 3 months, I understood something I never had the courage to face before. Sometimes, if we want others to grow, we have to let them hit bottom. We have to let them see the bare truth they've been avoiding. Michael needed to see his own weakness in order to stand on his own feet. Vanessa needed to lose what she thought was secure to understand the real value of family. Lily needed to learn that responsibility begins with even the smallest words. And I needed to learn to stop sacrificing unconditionally, because when you give too much without setting boundaries, love becomes a burden, and kindness, without limits, becomes a bridge for others to walk across without ever looking back. Now my family has changed. Not perfect, not always harmonious, but there is respect. There is listening. There is gratitude. Something I once thought I would never receive from my own flesh and blood. Michael works hard every day, and sometimes just seeing him step out of his car with confidence makes my heart feel as light as the wind. He is no longer someone who only knows how to take, but a man who helps, who makes up for the past, who apologizes, and who repairs what is broken. Vanessa has learned the greatest lesson of her life, that a strong woman is not someone who demands, but someone who stands up after she falls. I don't need her to be perfect. I only need to see that she is genuinely trying, and I have seen that. And Lily. Every weekend, her laughter in my kitchen is the sound that makes my house feel young again, as if life itself wanted to give me a second chance to guide a child through love rather than through exhausting sacrifice. I look at my family and realize I am no longer pushed to the side. I am the keeper of the flame, the one who reminds them to be kind, the one who teaches them gratitude, something the younger generation often forgets. These days, the late years of my life have become wonderfully light. I have time to cook the dishes I enjoy, read books in the morning sun, tend to the lavender bushes in my yard, and listen to my children's and grandchildren's little stories without swallowing any hidden pain. No one knocks on my door asking for money. No one sees me as an obligation. No one forgets my presence. They come because they want me there, not because they need something from me. And for a mother, that is the greatest gift. I tell this story not to boast and not to blame anyone. I tell it because I know there are so many people out there like me, Mothers, grandmothers, older women who are dismissed, overlooked, treated as old, unnecessary, or a burden. I want them to know no one has the right to treat you as something worthless, no matter who they are. Not your husband, not your child, not your daughter-in-law or son-in-law. If I, a 66-year-old woman who spent a lifetime sacrificing, can stand up and reclaim my voice, then you can too. You deserve love with boundaries. You deserve respect. You deserve to be heard. If my family can change, then yours can too. And now, as the story closes, I have only one thing left to say. If I could do it, you can do it. And I hope to hear your own story. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the final line of this story. I truly appreciate your presence, whether you're watching from the United States, Vietnam, or anywhere in the world. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment that woke you up the way mine did? If you enjoy stories like this, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next ones. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.